What's going on, guys? Welcome to another video, and today I'm excited to drop another coaching call on the channel. And today we're going to be covering a bunch of Redux stuff and a bunch of value-based propositions, so get excited. It's going to be a fun video, and without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce the amazing community that we have over at Profit with JavaScript. Say hello, guys.
Yo!
Hey,
Hey, that's it. Let's go.
Let's go!
Let's go, guys.
That's what I'm talking about, guys.
Let's go.
That's the energy that we want to get started on.
Yeah, let's go!
Awesome stuff, guys. Nice. Right. Now, guys, we were having a great conversation before we literally started going live. So I'm going to go ahead and literally carry on from where we were going off. And we were pretty much answering questions. So guys, let's jump straight back into that. So we started off with Priyanshu had a question, and then whoever was about to ask a question afterwards, feel free after Priyanshu. So Priyanshu, shoot.
Yeah. So I was asking about TypeScript. So like I've done a lot of JavaScript now, and I'm also going to do a lot of it again. But TypeScript is like something like a strongly typed language, and it has a lot of concepts of classes and object-oriented programming in general. So like although it is a very evolving language, it hasn't evolved yet. People are still trying to learn TypeScript and like getting a hand in it, but I don't know the future of it. So like if you could just introduce us with TypeScript and like the future of it and everything like that.
Yeah. So if you guys don't know what TypeScript is, you have JavaScript. JavaScript's the language that we code in whenever we're doing like web development, or the brains behind web development. TypeScript, if you've come from a language like Java or C# or something like that, you'll notice that in those languages, you have things like, you have to define the type of a variable. So you have like string, number, integer, double, float, things like that. You have all sorts of types. Now, the reason why is because it's meant to be a strongly typed language, right? So it's strongly typed because notice how in JavaScript, all you have to do is sort of type in const name equals Priyanshu, and it just works, right? But if you was going in TypeScript, you'd have to say const name colon, and then you'd say string, and then you would say Priyanshu. And then what would happen is if I tried to give, oh, nice, Corey's in the house. What's up, dude? Yeah, but if I went to go ahead and give, let's go ahead and say I tried to give const name. So imagine that I'm just going to go ahead and you guys can see my screen, right? Let me go ahead and share it. No. So you guys can see this?
Yep, we can see it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So imagine like we had something like this. We had const name, and then, so this is what we used to, right? So this kind of thing. In TypeScript, you basically have it like this. I can't remember the exact syntax, but I think it's that. Yeah. I think it's that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Because I used to code quite a bit in it, but it's been a while. But let me go ahead and freeze it. Nice. Oh, man. Okay. Yeah. So there we go. So you'd have to do this. But now imagine if I went ahead and did this, right? So I went and did something like this. What's going to happen? It's going to freak out. It's basically going to say, no, this doesn't work because we're protecting against this sort of headache. But we don't want to allow for anything but a string inside of here. So this is the benefit of, it's the benefit of TypeScript. Right. And there's also a bunch of other stuff. There's like classes. I mean, you get classes in JavaScript, but there's also like a, I can't remember. I used it so much a while back, but I kind of forgot.
Function.
Arrow functions are part of JavaScript, but there are a bunch of things involved in TypeScript. But what we'll do is we'll have a deep dive one day on TypeScript, and we can pretty much go through that. But to answer your question, Priyanshu, so the future of sort of TypeScript and what is it about? Wait, where's they move everything.
Also, Priyanshu, I just have like one other thing. A lot of companies, like FANG companies, use TypeScript. So, I mean, I think there is still a bright future for TypeScript.
There's definitely a bright future for TypeScript, 100%. The thing I would say for production environments, building in TypeScript is actually really powerful, right? It's really powerful because you're protecting your code base. And the thing is, when you introduce TypeScript, you can either do it in the beginning. So you can either build the project from ground up with TypeScript. That way that's kind of but be careful, by the way. So whenever you use TypeScript, there's also a type of a variable called any, right? So you get string, number, and you can also have any. Now, any stands for, it's kind of like, you're kind of going back to JavaScript then, because you're letting any
type variable, like right?
You're letting any sort of any value go into that variable. So it could be a number, it could be a string. So you want to kind of stay away from that, otherwise it kind of defeats the purpose. So you want to kind of give everything set values, but don't want to get too far into it. But the main sort of takeaway from this is, yes, TypeScript is here to stay. It has a place and it's very, very powerful. But the main thing is, for example, if I was to get a freelancing job right now, would I code it in TypeScript? No. Why? Because it adds quite a bit of time onto the build. It complicates the build. It adds maintainability to the build. I wouldn't sort of scream against it, but I wouldn't personally do it now in a new build for a client. If only unless they requested TypeScript, or if it was for a team effort or something like that, would I recommend it. If I was to go into a team, so I've actually gone into a team before and implemented TypeScript when they didn't have TypeScript. So I actually went in and I said to them, I think TypeScript would benefit the team because it would basically, by introducing types, you pretty much eradicate a ton of bugs because it no longer, it sort of prevents you from, it prevents, how do I make a gallery? Yeah, it basically prevents you from having unexpected variables being sort of used when they shouldn't be. But you can pretty much, you can introduce TypeScript halfway through a project. So imagine you've got this huge JavaScript project. You can actually go ahead and slowly translate files to TypeScript. You can also do that. And that's
TypeScript compatible with React?
Yeah, so remember, JavaScript is the language, React is just a library in JavaScript. So think of it this way. So you've got, let me share my screen. Okay, so think of it this way, right? So you've got so many keyboard shortcuts. So you've got JavaScript, right? This is like the brains of web development. We all know this. We all love this, right? And then you basically have, so then you have React. And all React is a library that uses JavaScript, right? Now, TypeScript is basically they call it a superset, which means it's basically just an upgrade it basically adds on stuff to JavaScript, right?
So like all the TypeScript code, all the JavaScript code is actually valid TypeScript, right? Like, just like JSON is valid to JavaScript, it's like JavaScript is valid in TypeScript.
Yeah, so remember, every single thing that is in TypeScript, it has JavaScript inside of it. So it's JavaScript with extra stuff. That's all you need to think, which means if you write code in TypeScript, you have to do something called a transpile step, transpilation step, right? Now, do you need to know exactly what this means? No, it basically just means that there's a step involved which converts this code to JavaScript, sorry, because this doesn't run in the browser. This is code that we write, and then there's a step which basically converts all of this stuff to this stuff. But we don't see that step, as in you just kind of implement it or you use like a template or something like that. But we're not going to get into that right now. But the main point is browsers run JavaScript. We code in TypeScript, and then this special magic makes this code work in a browser. Okay? So that's how it works. Yeah. So that's how it works. But let's go ahead and, oh my God, I hate.
Thank you.
So my question was, Sonny, my question was, we've got React, Node.js, and JavaScript. Okay. Now, Node.js, I'm not sure where it fits into the equation. I thought it's a front-end stuff. Then my mind is saying it's backend because I thought it renders JavaScript. But where does it actually fit in? And I'm listening and I'm seeing that people are studying Node.js. I thought it's just something sitting there waiting to receive JavaScript commands. Am I right? Or?
So the way it works is you're close. You're very close. And it is a confusing thing. I think you're not the only one who's going to be confused about this. So pretty much, this will be able to help you out. I help out a few people. So again, share my screen. Boom. Let's go back to the drawing board. So imagine you've got... the question was Node.js. What is it, right? So in coding, you've got front end and you've got, oh, God's sake. God damn it. You've got front end. Front end. And you've got back end, right? Back end. Now, in an app, what does this look like? Front end is basically where the phone is. So this is where like the phone, the desktop, whatever it is, this is where the client goes and sort of like plays around with the app. So it's got some kind of header. It's got some buttons on the screen. It's got footer. This is your web page, right? So this is the web page. So web page. So this is your front end. So the person's going to play around with your front end. Now, that sounds bad. And then you've got the back end, right? I just realized that. And we're on YouTube, so yeah. Then you've got the back end, which I'm not going to say that.
We all understood that.
Oh man, and it's something else, right?
Okay.
And then you've got the back end. So here you've got, this will be like the server, right? Now on the front end, you've got so everything runs JavaScript. Okay, so when we're talking about, so JavaScript runs on the front end and it also runs on the back end, right? You can use Python and stuff like that on the back end, but we're going to assume that we're using JavaScript across the entire interface, right? So on the front end, you would have React. So here you would have React, okay? You'd have React, and then that would render out this beautiful front end that we would basically go ahead and build. Now, on the back end, you don't have React. React is a front end library that uses JavaScript. On the back end, we have a runtime environment called node.js. And all that this does is node.js is basically like, imagine it's like an environment that basically just runs on this server. So it's an environment that just runs here and it lets you execute JavaScript, right? So all you need to know is that whenever you see React, it's always front end. Whenever you see node.js, always back end.
Right. So, but why do people learn Node.js? They say they are learning Node.js? Is it just for CLI, like command line, or has Node.js got a language that you've got to learn?
So remember, Node.js is JavaScript. So if you learn some JavaScript on the front end, you're going to be able to use it in the back end as well. But what you need to remember is, so let's say we had a web page, right? And let's go ahead and say like this had some kind of booking system. So I went ahead and say this was Airbnb. So I go ahead and I input I want to stay in London for 3 nights, and then I click book, right? So I'm going to go ahead and click book over here. Now, when I click book, it makes some kind of request to some kind of server, right? And on this server, we could have like MongoDB running, like we can have some kind of database, we could have Firebase at the back, we could have a few things at the back, right? And what we do is basically like when we book it, it sends something called a request. Now, this is where you might hear the term of API. So you might hear like an API being used. And now an API, all it means is how things communicate like from the front end to the back end, right? Now, the benefit of an API is that companies, so imagine you want to basically talk to PayPal. You want PayPal in your website. Then PayPal provides you an API, which means that you can talk to the PayPal backend.
Sure.
Right? And then they will basically they'll provide you instructions on how you send things over to their backend and then how it comes back to you. Right? Now, we can also build the entire backend, which is what we pretty much do in a lot of cases. So I would recommend, if you're kind of confused and it still doesn't make sense, the 2 takeaways from this, right? React, always front end. Right, so whenever you hear this, it's always front end, right? Okay. Never get that confused, and that will sort of simplify everything. Node.js is always back end, and
But Sonny, when we are using Node.js, like it can be used for many different front end stuff. Like we can, like without Node, we cannot do React, we cannot do Electron. Or
See, that's where the confusion comes in. That's incorrect. The back end is Node.js is not a language. Node.js is something called a runtime environment, which means that you would have a server like running in like AWS or Firebase or something like that, or like a cloud function. The environment would be Node.js, right? Now, this is only running JavaScript. So remember, underneath the hood, imagine like these are just 2 different cars, right? So you've got like a car running React, you've got a car running Node. I mean, it's not the same thing, but like think of it that way, right? And under the hood is JavaScript every time, right? So whenever you're using React or Node.js, but remember, in order to run any sort of like code on a backend server, you need Node.js running on that server, right? So you need Node.js, or Dino is now popular. You can run Dino on the backend server and then run your JavaScript on that. But on the front end, you don't. So browsers like have support JavaScript out of the box. They let you sort of run JavaScript on a browser, which is why every single web page we use has JavaScript. And then we can use libraries such as React to go ahead and build these like really nice web pages. Yeah.
So JavaScript can be used for full stack dev.
Yes, and the reason why is because you can do front end development and back end, which is why we call it full stack, because it's the entire stack. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So adding to that car analogy, we also use V8 engine inside of Node and React. If that helps.
Yeah. So remember, try not to get confused with the engines just yet, like all that stuff. That's just like sort of versions and stuff like that, and certain. Every time there's an upgrade, for example, I think it's in like version 8 and above, you could start using optional chaining or something like that. Or there was a certain version where you had to be to use like new features of JavaScript. But the point is that that's like a separate thing. But yes, to answer your question, that's where you basically would have, you would set the engine inside of package.json. So you'd usually do that inside of package.json. And that's where you'd set something called an engine. But in this case, guys, if you don't know what I'm talking about, don't even worry about that for now. Just know about this stuff, and this is what you need to focus on. So we have front end, we have back end.
Sonny, and Node.js is like IIS or like Apache in the LAMP stack. Is that correct?
Okay, so yes.
Because IIS is also a web server. Apache is also a web server, and Node.js is also like acts like a.
So I mean,
they are just a server. Node.js is like you can consider and runtime, which is running a programming language. You can. So this is just running your JavaScript code on the server. It's nothing.
Because
I Nginx or like ISS. This is a different server. The environment like which is installed on a machine. Windows. Windows is a operating system. The same way, the server is also a operating system. So like, and on that server, like Linux, you install Apache or the Nginx, which will run your services. You can run PHP also on that one, then Node.js also on that one.
Yeah.
So these are the different things.
And honestly, I wouldn't get too involved with like Apache and that stuff, because that goes into DevOps territory, which is something you can move into in time and kind of get involved with. Now, top tip for you guys, for everyone watching, even on YouTube, if you do want to sort of branch out and sort of you want to up your income, DevOps is an area where there's a lot of money. Like, as in, that's just something which I'll say. So I actually sort of like took on a responsibility in my first job of just, one of the developers touched all the DevOps stuff. So I pretty much just shadowed him. So I pretty much sat next to him. I was like, dude, just show me what you do. And I picked up on a lot of DevOps stuff, and the pay is really high for DevOps work. And it's pretty cool stuff what you can do with DevOps. Now, DevOps is just kind of like, I'm not going to get into DevOps today, but you can go ahead and check it out. But DevOps is sort of more of the pipeline of when you push code, what happens, how is it sort of like pushed in, how do you sort of like scale, deploy, that sort of stuff is all
like deployment.
Yeah, it's all that sort of.
DevOps is for continuous integration mainly.
Yeah, so continuous integration, things like that. Yeah.
Yes, and CD.
Yep, CI/CD pipelines.
Sunny, I have one question.
Yeah.
I work in ASP.NET as a full stack. So there the build time of our application is quite high.
Okay.
So how can we compare that build time? Because every time when we build something, so it takes a toll on the developer. Like, you have to wait for this much time every time you build. So in a large like an organizational level project, so what is the if it's a big project, suppose say 1 gig or higher, so what is the build time, or what can be approximately the build time? Is it fast or is it slow according to your experience?
So that's a very broad question, because if we build an app right now, the build time is going to be super quick. There's not much to compile. There's not much to add in, right? If you have loads of, like, you can have something called Husky, which is where before you push your code, it runs a bunch of checks and it runs a bunch of, like, they're called pre-commit hooks. So you can do test scenarios and things like that, but you can have a bunch of stuff like that involved, and you can have loads of different things like which happen when you basically go ahead and commit and stuff like that. And you can also have a bunch of other stuff happen when you push some code. So, but the thing is like, look, when you have a build step, it depends on sort of like, if your code is getting, so let's say all your code is written in TypeScript, then it would pretty much be a case of it would take longer because it has to transpile all of the code. So you see what I mean? It really depends on what is in your build, right? It really depends on that sort of stuff. But with that said, that's a really good question actually. And also, I see comments coming through on YouTube as well, so I can see you guys on there. But this is mainly focused towards the people inside the course.
Just ask a quick question about React.
Go for it, Pedro.
Yeah. So basically, I started learning JavaScript, and then I think I discovered React a little bit too early, and I dived into React, and I just loved React, and React is amazing.
Yeah.
And one of the main reasons I joined the PWJ was because I was lacking a lot of the JavaScript, building websites in JavaScript.
Yep.
But my question is, should I keep specializing in React?
Yep.
And not focus like so much in building websites with pure JavaScript? Because I feel like it's a lot easier to build websites with React than it is with JavaScript.
Yep.
So I was wondering, is it good to specialize mainly in React and follow React like properly?
Yeah, so really good question. I think that's going to help a lot of people out. The question is pretty much, should he stay on like pure web dev, so HTML, CSS, JavaScript, or specialize in React, right? Now, what I would say is, so to answer your question in an example, I never write websites anymore in pure HTML, CSS, JavaScript, ever.
Nice.
Ever. Right? I always use React, yeah? Because it's just so much easier. I literally do npm create React app, npx create React app, and boom, I'm up and running. And even today, I'm going to show you guys the template for Redux, and pretty much you can go ahead and it just goes ahead and sets everything up for you, right? Now, remember, there's few things that you need to consider when you're doing any of this stuff. So why did React get popular? It's because it's so quick and easy to get up and running. It's pretty much plug and play, and it's very lightweight. So if you need React Router, you can plug it in. If you don't need it, you don't need it. It's going to make your website quicker without it, right? As in, it's not going to slow it down much with it, but the point is that you only have what you need. Whereas with Angular and things like that, it's very heavy. You have to pretty much take in everything and then kind of go with it that way. So my advice would be specialize in React, and the payoff would be a lot greater than sort of trying to branch out. And this is also answering a question of which framework / library should I learn? Like, should I learn Vue or should I learn Angular and React? Maybe I should learn both. And no, I would say specialize, because if you can provide a tremendous amount of skill in one thing, then you're going to basically be worth a lot more, right?
Right,
so
I see that, yeah.
Exactly. So remember, like, and the one thing I will, which is really good for you guys right now, is that you're actually at a very lucky point where React is so, you can be super specialized in React, and it's worth a huge amount, and it's pretty much here. It is here to stay. Like I'm telling you, it's going to be here for quite a while. Like React, and the benefit and the beauty is that because it's full stack, the skills you're going to require when you do React are going to be very much cross. You can pretty much go ahead and, like, if I need to code in Python now, I can pretty much go ahead and pick it up really quick. Like, I really don't need to kind of like go back and kind of like spend ages. I kind of, because you know the programming principles and you've practiced it, you've done full stack development, so you've done front end, back end. It really, after that point, it doesn't matter really what's being used. The things which might differ, React is going to stay for a very long time on the front end. You're going to have iterations like server-side rendering, things like that, which are definitely worth investing in. I'd say, so to answer your point as well, specializing in React is one thing, but sort of taking it to the next level, learning about server-side rendering in React, things like that, like Next.js, Preact, they're going to be quite beneficial, because you can go ahead and say to a company, rather than your website taking like a few, like 500 milliseconds, now it will take 200 milliseconds. Now that might not sound like a big deal, but when you've got millions of customers or something like that, it literally makes it, like, it is ridiculous how much money that translates to for a company. Which means, imagine you can basically go ahead and say, okay, I'm going to make your website load this much quicker, right? Now you can ask for whatever you really want. You can ask, it really doesn't matter about the money. If you said, I want 30 grand extra, they're going to be like, well, you're going to save us this much. And trust me when I say they're making a lot more than 30 grand from the trade-off, right? In a lot of these cases. So I would say specialized. Yeah, that was a really good question, dude.
That makes me really happy because I think for me at least React is so much easier to build websites. Like so much easier.
I mean, even with CSS handling and things like that, it's going to be 100%. Like it's just so much more fun.
Thing
I
is
actually
that
want to add a point to Sunny's point. Hey, Sunny.
Hey, dude, how's it going?
Hi. So I actually wanted to add a point to what just Sunny said.
Yeah.
He said like React is so powerful. Actually, what happened was a company was asking for Angular, whether like what an Angular developer. I said I'm like specialized in React, and they still wanted me to go further with the interviews. They were like, can you just make this happen with React? And they took it seriously, and they were even ready to pay me more for React in one of the interviews, actually.
Dope, man. So the original job wasn't even for React.
No, the position was for an Angular developer.
Nice.
And I applied. I told, man, I can't do this. I can't do in React. It's like I can't switch from React to Angular. That's not the way. So they were like, okay, interesting. So can you make it? They challenged me actually. Can I make it in? So I have an interview round for tomorrow. Maybe it's the second last round.
Awesome.
And then it's the HR round. So I have a pretty big challenge in front of me.
Dude, well, Ruben, like good luck, one, and two. I think that's awesome. Like, and that's not the first time. That's not the first time I've heard that as well. That's yeah, honestly, like, see, you got the whole community behind you, dude. And what I would say is that's not the first time I've heard that as well. That's really a common thing as well. Like I've heard so many people who there are companies that are offering an Angular position, and what tends to happen is that you say like, oh yeah, I know React. And then they're like, oh, actually, yeah, you know, like go ahead and do it with React because we kind of like React. We didn't make the jump yet. So a lot of places are like that. I think that helped a lot of people out. So thank you for that. Somebody, I just want to add one question so this is from somebody on YouTube, and I think it's actually a really good question. It says, for enterprise application development, Angular is better. Had this question in the interview. So I disagree because, okay, so put it this way. Just think about what's in practice, as in companies that are using this stuff. And you guys might not be able to see this right now, but it's pretty much, I just highlighted a little question. But all they're saying is Angular is better for bigger companies. And the point is, so I actually worked inside of Tesco. Now, if you guys don't know what Tesco is like the Walmart in America. So do you guys know what Walmart is, right? Like that
Tesco Lotus, right?
Yes, exactly. So like it's basically like Walmart. It's a huge shopping complex pretty much, right? Now,
around the world.
Yeah, exactly. Around the world as well, right? Now,
there are Thailand, Indonesia.
Exactly. So Thailand, even the Thailand website, one of my good friends, I actually brought him on a coaching call early on. He was working on the Thailand integration in Tesco. So I'm good friends with that guy who done that stuff for Tesco. So it's pretty cool, right? Like, and all of Tesco, the entire Tesco website is React, right? So every single thing is React. So to answer that question, no, it doesn't matter about size.
Sorry, Sonny.
It's powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. So related to the Pedro's question about React.js. So actually, are there cases in production where you prefer using just pure JS, CSS, and HTML compared to React, or just there are no such cases for production? I mean, not for learning projects, but especially for productions, maybe for a even small website, for a small content website, where it doesn't have any connection with API and JavaScript.
Yeah. I would say, honestly, no. I mean, like what I would say is, to answer your question in a more focused way, no. There's not a need for doing it in pure HTML, CSS, JavaScript, but there is a need in some cases to do very sort of granular JavaScript tasks. So your understanding of pure JavaScript sometimes is needed. So pure JavaScript meaning like DOM manipulation. So like as in how to find elements on a web page, things like that. Sometimes you need to get a bit hacky with JavaScript, right? So it's kind of a balance of knowing enough, but then not getting too bogged into sort of like, as in the point is that everything can be built with React, but your understanding of JavaScript, you should sort of dial it into a point where you're comfortable manipulating the DOM, you're comfortable manipulating things like that. And
right, it's still based in JavaScript, so yeah,
exactly. Like it's going to be kind of But yeah, I never ever find myself in situations where I'm like, I should do this in pure HTML, CSS, JavaScript. If I see somebody's built a website in that, I either A, run the other way, or B, I pretty much would propose that we rebuild in something like React. But I wouldn't really take on anyone who's doing that approach.
Yeah, I got it.
Like a good thing about React is that you can integrate vanilla JS and HTML all into one file.
Yeah. So you see JSX, exactly. JSX is super valuable.
Even if I, for instance, if I have a lot of content on the website, let's say I have like a lot of pages there for my website with the content. So in that case, I'm gonna use React.js, but anyway, it's gonna contain a lot of HTML pages in the directory, right? Anyway.
Yeah. So remember, have you done any of the clones yet? Out of curiosity.
Not really, not practically, no.
Okay, so one thing I would say is it would really benefit you to go through the clones at some point, because you'll see how it will answer your question on having several pages, because everything in React is component based, which means even every single web page that you kind of would be looking at, say you have the home page, the contact me page, the my account page, would pretty much be a component inside of React. And then you use React Router to render the separate pages. And then they do very clever things like lazy loading, like things like that. So it only loads what it needs to load until the point at which you need that page. And then it'll go ahead, click it, and it's super fast. But I would recommend looking into React Router, because that's going to show you how to have several pages on a website. And I would also recommend, so Naz actually said we need to enable passcode. Okay, yeah, so you guys are right. We'll fix that in the next call. But also, I would recommend the clones are really going to help you sort of answer that question. Yeah.
Right, thanks.
Yeah, because that's a good point. Does it make a difference? Because obviously you'd have like one HTML file for like the homepage and then an HTML for the contact page. But in React, you would have like a bunch of different components per page. Yep. Does that slow down? Like if I would have like, imagine like 20 components in the main page, and then in the second page would have another 20 components. Would that slow down, or is it still really fast?
So Pedro, no, it would be really fast.
I want to say Facebook has almost 30,000 components.
That's true. That's a good point.
Yeah, so that's a really good. Yes, I think literally examples are really good at sort of demonstrating it. But no, so everything is. React is very clever at staying optimal. It's very, very clever.
Right, because he only renders what he needs to render each time. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, it only renders what he needs.
That's why they use a microservice architecture dedicated to a particular purpose or particular service.
Yeah,
so and that's how Facebook keeps it super neat and clean.
Exactly, and they also have, interestingly enough, they actually have microservice architecture is something which I recommend everyone go ahead and read up on. It's quite a valuable thing to know about. But they also actually have front-end microservices now, which is quite crazy enough. Like where pretty much they can scale up, scale down on the front-end components, and then you have component libraries. It gets really you can optimize everything, put it that way. But for you guys, when you're learning React, the only one thing I would say at this point that you should worry about optimizing is use of keys. So whenever you have like a list or an array, make sure you're using the correct keys. Now, a good key is not the same key for everything, right? A key, the whole purpose of a key is to be unique, right? So it's to be unique. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, just pretty much we'll get into all that stuff in a bit.
That was the question I asked you a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I remember it came up in the call. Yeah. Nice.
Sonny, I have a question.
So Tripti and then Priyanshu, and then we'll jump into the build.
Yeah, I was wondering for 2 days. Yeah, like what are the things I need to learn to be a front-end job ready front-end developer?
So job ready front-end developer, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a pretty big question, but I would pretty much just go ahead and just do a quick whiteboard session on it. So so things you need as front-end dev, right? Now, what I would say is we actually created a whole YouTube video on this, me and Kazi. Go ahead and check that out.
I went through all those things like because, but I was like wondering about like, I need to learn all those things. Yeah, if you could like write down the list.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So remember, like, try not to get it. So always keep an open mind, because even what I write on this list could be outdated tomorrow, right? As in, it's very quickly moving. So I'll show you some tactics to stay ahead of the curve. But HTML, this is your fundamentals. This stuff has to know. You need to know this stuff, right? As in, and I'm not saying you need to know it to a point where you're a master, because even never consider yourself a master. I still don't call myself an expert ever in React. I literally always keep like a beginner mindset of like, no, I can learn more. Like, as in, or never have like, oh, I know this stuff. You know, I know JavaScript. Like, you always want to keep sort of an open mind to that stuff. So, this is going to be your fundamentals. Now, inside the course, we cover a lot of this fundamental stuff inside of like modules 1, 2, 3 upwards, right? So you can pretty much go ahead and use that to strengthen this. I would recommend using things like Flexbox Froggy to go ahead and work on like your Flexbox skills, because that's super useful. CSS Grid is another one, which I think we should do a whole coaching session on CSS Grid, because it's kind of an intricate thing, but it's really powerful. Even I always kind of forget how to use it, and then I have to do a little refresher course before I use it.
I wanted to ask, like, should I just go with the Flexbox for now, and after learning few more things, then I go for CSS Grid, or like after learning?
Go with Flexbox. All my clones that I use are Flexbox, and they look beautiful. So everything's pretty much in that. So the next thing is, so once you get to a pretty comfortable point with this, right, with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, literally now there's always a popular question, and everyone sort of asks me like, so Sonny, like, when do I know when I'm ready for React? Or maybe I jumped into React too quick. Honestly, like, if you can get a web page up, right? So literally imagine you built out a web page, and then you were able to get, you got some text on the top. You pretty much had like a button. And then when I clicked this button, I got like some output. So it was like, oh my God, you clicked the button. Like, wow, it clicked, right? Now to get that working, it's going to use JavaScript. Now I literally tell people, they're like, no, Sonny, like that can't be enough. I'm not joking when I say, like, if you, like, once you literally get some CSS working on this page, make it look a bit neat, you have a button, it outputs some stuff, you pretty much connected HTML, CSS, and JavaScript together, right? I would say don't waste any more time. Just kind of like jump into React, because you're still going to be learning this stuff, but like, why delay it? Like, why kind of go the old school route and relearn everything and do everything? Just start using React. And my best advice would be do it with the clones and pick up on pattern recognition. Pattern recognition meaning you're going to start to see trends. You're going to start to see like patterns with what we do in every build. And it's going to help you sort of advance. So React is going to be very important there. Now React it breaks down into like a bunch of things. So remember, like I said, it's a library. So it's a very lightweight library, React, right? It consists of a bunch of things inside of it. So you've got like, if I want page routing, right? So if we need like multiple pages in an app, then I would go to React Router, right? So React Router. If I need if I need data management inside of an app, right? So I need to like sort of handle the flow of data in an app, I would recommend learning the React Context API first, right? And then I would recommend learning Redux, right? So this is like part 1. And then this is part 2. And now many people are like, yeah, but Sonny, everyone uses Redux in professional environments. But all I'm going to say is like, trust me when I say you're going to save a huge amount of headache and time. Learn this first. Understand how the pattern works with like the way you dispatch actions. There's a reducer. What the heck is a reducer? All that sort of stuff. Like, understand how it works, because this is a really easy and quick to integrate. Again, all of that stuff is in the clones, and we have like 25 clones now. So you literally have 25 pieces of content to go ahead and practice this stuff through. And then I would say, once you understand the pattern, then move to Redux. And today we're going to be covering Redux. We're going to be going into a deep dive into Redux. And I'm going to show you a bunch of different things inside of Redux and how we can go ahead and work. Because Redux is something, again, like I said, it's going to bring you the most value when it comes to actually applying to the job. So what's most important in this point? So I'm trying to not list too much because I want it to be actionable, right? So I would say at this point, React is definitely going to be like, this is where your money's at. Yeah. So if you can pretty much get this down, you can pretty much get on the way to making some money. Now, a part of a front-end developer is making things look beautiful, right? If you're a front-end developer and stuff looks really ugly all the time, chances are like your trust value kind of comes down. People are like, oh, do I really want him to build an app that looks like it's meant to be Facebook, but it looks like an old school 1990s like piece of crap? Like, no, you don't want that, right? So I would recommend really diving in, getting your Flexbox down, right? Look into things like Material UI. So Material UI. Now this is
we also have Chakra.
What's that?
We also have Chakra. That's another UI library for React. If anyone's interested, they can check it out.
Oh yeah, so Chakra. There's a few that are out.
Yeah.
Now remember, these are the reason why I say these are good. These are good for personal projects to make things look really beautiful, to get things looking a nice kind of way. But the point of using design libraries and stuff like that is because that you're going to start to see trends. You're going to start to see what's in fashion, because literally just like you paint a house and like sometimes gray's in fashion, and you get like houses where like everyone starts to paint their houses like interior gray, and you're like, okay, well that's kind of a thing now. Like it's the same thing in web development, right? It's the exact same thing in web development. Like the web kind of goes in and out of fashion, and you basically need to keep up with that. So I'm going to give you guys a little trick right now. What you can do is you can go ahead and check out this website. So this is a really good website. I actually teach a lot of my one-on-one students this. So dribble.com. Now Dribble is amazing because like, let's say you want to build an app, or you've got a freelance client who wants to go ahead and do some kind of like, they come up to you and say, hey, Sonny, I want to build like a financial app, right? Then I would literally come in here and look, they've got some designs for a financial app, right? So now you've got some kind of inspiration. Now, did I pay for any of this? Nope. I just pretty much came on this website. It's free, but notice the design. So let's look at this design for a sec, right? Very flat, very flat. You don't see 3D buttons. You don't see like 3D things. Everything's kind of like crisp and flat, right? The colors are sort of like matching and things like that. Now let's go ahead and look at an app like, let's go ahead and go over to here, right? So you've got like a gadget store app. Now, what do we notice here? Oh, again, everything's flat, right? Yeah. It's following this flat. There's not an overload of colors. There's like a powerful use of white, and then they sort of splash colors in at different points. And you can start to tell, the reason why this is so powerful is because this is the current trend. So the current trend, the current in right now is modern flat design.
Flat UI.
Yeah, so flat UI. So, and this is something which we always see when people tend to build their sort of like portfolios and stuff. Is I see like 3D buttons, and when they hover over it, the button kind of pops out a little bit. And as much as we love that, it's sort of against what's in fashion right now, right? So it's kind of like, instead, what's in fashion right now is if you go to like, let's go ahead and quickly have a check out Material UI. Let's go ahead and do button. And you guys will see, like, look at when I click this button, you're going to see like a ripple effect. Yeah. So this is like Google's sort of UI library. And you see, this is like this sort of it's a very sort of nice, beautiful, sort of like very simple, but elegant design, right? So all this stuff is, if you just want to be a front-end developer, it's crucial in understanding this stuff. Now, going back to what we were doing. So again, get really dialed in on this stuff and React, right? Yeah. Don't overcomplicate it, because I saw like even previously when you first asked the question, there was like a huge list of things, right? Yeah. Remember, just like Pedro said, the goal is not to be like a master of every single thing. Is to really harness your skill set and build your skill in our case, React, right? And use things as you need it. Because I'm like, if I was to say to you, hey, it's kind of cool to go ahead and check out a VR React library, you'll be like, oh, that's sick. Like, yeah, but I mean, that's going to come in handy one day. But I can guarantee pretty much hardly any client is going to come up to you and say, I want a VR library. It's going to be very rare. So you see, like, it's all about picking and choosing what you're going to be using most. in this case, this is going to be pretty much the main things you should dial in on before progressing anywhere further.
Hey, Sonny, I have a quick question. Is Bootstrap used much anymore?
So yes, it is used. Bootstrap they recently actually just got rid of jQuery support inside of Bootstrap. So that's really interesting. So a lot of you guys might have heard of jQuery in web development world. jQuery now is no longer supported in Bootstrap 5, which is telling you something. It's basically jQuery is slow. JavaScript's evolved. You can pretty much do everything. If you see code written in jQuery, just know that that's not a good thing, right? That's not a good thing now to see code written in jQuery. You can pretty much refactor everything to go ahead and make it like ES6 JavaScript. And I always do that. And I always sort of like have a go at somebody if they do it in jQuery, because it's not a good practice, right? To go ahead and do that. So
I don't even look at code if it's jQuery.
Yeah, I mean,
jQuery days are gone.
Yeah, I actually, to be honest, it's true. I really.
Sonny, can you bring up that screen that you had?
Yeah, sure, dude.
Not the dribble.
This one.
No, the tool. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. So go ahead, screenshot this, guys, if you need to. Yeah. So that's
Sonny,
gonna be.
I have a question.
Yep.
Like all the full stack positions are asking about Docker. Is it possible to have a lecture about Docker?
Oh, about Docker.
Yes.
Right. So so this is something interesting as well. So most full stack positions will say to you like, oh yeah, Docker, right? They'll list that in the tools of things to use. Now, truth be told, yes, I've used Docker in the past. But do I know how to use Docker off the top of my head? Nope. Like if you ask me, like, as in, do you remember how to do? I remember Docker compose up and down. Beyond that, like, as in, I really don't remember it. I literally use it as and when I need it, or if a company is using it, I will use it. I don't think it's the skill you should be prioritizing your time towards. So in a sort of, let's imagine you've got 3 months. Right? And you've got dedicated time towards 3 months. What are you going to learn in 3 months? I wouldn't even have Docker on my list. I would literally have React. And I would literally just push all of my time and everything into React, into backend, full stack development and things like that, because that's going to bring you the most value towards a client, towards a company, towards anyone like out there who wants to hire you. Whereas if you said, hey, I'm really good at Docker, trust me, like the chances are they've already set the Docker stuff up, right? You literally just have to go in and just run a command and it'll just pull everything up. But I'm happy to do it. But again, I'm always sort of like trying to resolve the sessions around what's going to bring everyone the most value. And in this case, things like Redux, I think which every single person on this call will benefit from Redux. So it's always trying to figure out that balance of, trying to get the most value happening. But and also Oliver Gomez on YouTube dropped a good comment. He said Docker is not necessarily LOL, it's for DevOps. Yeah, it's more of a DevOps orientated tool as well. So chances are you're gonna have you're gonna have a DevOps guy, and that DevOps guy is gonna pretty much have it run up and running. Now again, if you know it, it's gonna be valuable, but I wouldn't put your time towards it at this point.
Sonny. So Sonny, quick comment. I don't know if it's a question. You just mentioned like the full stack development, you have to learn both sides of the coin, right? You need to know React first off, and then you have the CSS component. And so when will it be a fair statement to say that when you try to be a full stack developer, you're trying to be a jack of all, master of none, and sort of just know enough to kind of delve into it and get the job done? Or as you said, how far along should you be in CSS? Like you just said, how to make the site look pretty. That's it's not possible for everyone, right? Unless
I would say so. Again, when I first started coding React, this is full transparency, so it kind of gives you guys some reality towards it. My CSS was crap. They didn't look anything like the sites I'm building right now. Honestly, I kind of thought like, oh, I don't want to learn CSS. Like I really don't care. But when I put time and effort into it, it really did kind of pay off in terms of value, because if you show a beautiful website to someone, that's going to grab them. right? They're going to be like, oh, this is nice, you know, like this is awesome. But if you show them a website and you're like, oh, so this is doing this on the back end and it's functioning in this kind of way and it's really cool. And it's kind of like, you kind of lose them, right? Like, as in if it looks beautiful and then it does stuff, then they're like, okay, I'm listening. Like, I'm all ears, right? Now, to answer Joe's question, pretty much what he asked is like, should we learn, like, if we sort of put our attention towards being full stack developer, are we going to sort of not specialize because we're going to try and be a jack of all trades? Now, the beauty of JavaScript is this, right? I would say, again, this is why I love Firebase. Firebase is really awesome because you can pretty much put your time and attention towards front end development, right? And you can power it with Firebase. So you don't have to focus too much on back end stuff, right? But what I would say is you'll reach a point where you naturally kind of need to do stuff. For example, process a payment. So whoever done the Amazon build, so I'm not talking about the standard build, but the 5-day challenge one. If you guys did that, then pretty much go ahead and you'll see that we use cloud functions to run a backend express server. So it's node.js running in Firebase Cloud Functions, which is the backend. And then we pretty much have everything running on that. Now, my advice would be this: start with React, build websites, make them look good, make them be functional, make them do everything, learn things like Redux. That's what I did for my first job. I was not even sort of like I had Java background, but I pretty much did a lot of React. No, I pretty much just kind of self-taught React to a very sort of like kind of average level, I'd say. And then I went into a full stack position. So I just got thrown in the deep end. Now, this will answer your question. Because I knew React, which is JavaScript, I was able to break down the backend and pretty much understand Node.js. And I was able to go ahead and look at what they're doing. And then you sort of, everything becomes about like logical flows and things like that. Like what is happening when they send data here. You just pretty much follow the code and you pretty much see, okay, so this is kind of happening. I can read it because it's JavaScript. I code in JavaScript because I do React. You see? Right. So the beauty is, if you're coding in front-end React stuff, you're going to be better at Node.js. If you're coding in Node.js back-end stuff, you're going to be better at front-end. So it's kind of like, this is the beauty. It's like it's a full stack natural cycle. So, but my advice would be stick to front-end first and then kind of move to back-end.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
After I watched Sonny's clone, I'm like, I apply flex to each and every div that exists. Like, even if I don't need to, I just apply div. Well, flex to every div.
What was that?
I apply flex to each and every div that exists right now after watching your clone.
Yeah, I would say it's a balance. It's a balance between having less code, which is clean and functional. Remember, more code doesn't mean better code. Right? Like you want code which is like literally you could look at it. Now I read a book and it was like literally it was like a little snippet and it literally changed my entire sort of perception on this stuff, because all the book said was all whatever I read, it was like a quote or something, and it was pretty much like comments are shit and comments are bad. And I was like, well, that doesn't make sense. But the point was that the reason why they said that is because your code itself should be so readable and functional that by looking at your code, I should be able to figure out what's going on. And since that happened, it's true. Like if I have to read a line of code, which is a comment, you see, it's kind of adding to complexity. Like it adds an extra step for another developer to come in and look at it. But if your code is off the bat named correctly, the variables make sense. It's not just like const A equals B. It's like, well, what the heck is that? Like if it's like const name equals Sonny, it's very clearly a name and it's got the value Sonny. Like it's very clear, right? So that's my take on sort of like making code. That's what makes you a good developer as opposed to somebody who's very junior. Like, as in that's where the sort of differentiation starts to come in as well. I saw a good question by Oliver Gomez, and he said, let me see if I can find it. It's on YouTube. It was I think I've lost it. Oh yeah. What's your take on GraphQL? Did Tesco use GraphQL? Yeah, so Tesco did use GraphQL. GraphQL is a query language for databases. We're not going to go into GraphQL now, but yes, to answer the question, GraphQL is something which is quite a valuable skill to have. And I would definitely say if you've got spare time, it's definitely not going to harm you to go ahead and learn GraphQL.
Sonny, quick question.
Yep.
Yeah. Do I need to means like I don't know about this means like these things. So I'm just asking. You just tell me if I need to learn. Like for my front end development job, do I need to learn like REST API?
Yeah, because think of it this way: you're gonna build you're gonna build a front end.
Hello?
You may not be doing front end stuff, but you're gonna be talking to a back end, right? You're gonna be talking to a back end of some kind.
Hello.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah. He's frozen.
Oh,
yeah. Hello.
Joe, I'm gonna make you co-host, dude. You're just a natural. Yeah. So to answer your question, Trepti, what was the question again?
Actually, just a minute. Let me complete. Like there is like on the list. Like I went through 4 and 5 videos. All those videos that clever programmer had uploaded, and from that I have made list like REST API, GraphQL, server-side rendering, and Node.js.
No, but you see, dude, what you've done is you just picked out the sort of hot topics, right? Now, how many of the builds have you done? How many clones have you done?
No, I have just started out, so I just want to like have a overview of all the things so that I could just
complete the clones first.
Yeah. So literally, like
I'm not just starting. Means like I'm just starting out, so I just want to get an overview, like what are the things I need to learn.
So to keep it simple, stop overcomplicating it. Like screw thinking about server-side rendering if you haven't done a clone yet. Like don't even worry about server-side rendering. I don't even build apps in server-side rendering unless I need to, like if I have to. Tesco had server-side rendering, so I worked on server-side rendering. In my own clients and my own freelance stuff, I don't really do it. Like only if they request it as a special thing, in which case I'll bump the price and I'll do it for them. But truth be told, what I would say is honestly, go and start building the clones and you'll start to see patterns, and it will answer a lot of the questions that you have. But that's the best thing you can do right now. Don't worry about writing lists. Don't worry about do I need to know this, because knowing things in isolation isn't going to help you build a product or a service, right? Knowing how and in what ways to break down a problem and apply that in practice, that's how you go ahead and become a developer. A developer isn't somebody who can code and just sort of write line after line of code. A good developer is pretty much somebody who can just say okay, you have a problem and you want to build a product to solve a problem, and I know some stuff in programming which is going to help you fix that problem, right?
Exactly.
And when you start thinking of it like that, it changes everything, and it starts to become, it's all about what value you can bring as opposed to I can code, right?
Yeah, I get it.
Sonny?
Yeah. One more question and then we're going to jump in. So let's go.
So it was just people are always onto asking, it's not me who's asking, but it's the people who are asking that whether they should master WordPress and stuff like that, or whether they should come to JavaScript. What's the value of JavaScript when WordPress and Wix are there? Seriously, some people keep on asking me that. So if you could just answer them.
So
also Webflow.
Yeah. So actually, that's a good chat. So these are two good points here. So okay, it's all down to goals, right? What is your goal? As in, if your goal is to make money and to sort of go ahead and to basically take on a bunch of clients and build them sites that they can easily maintain and sort of, go ahead and launch as a site, then I would say if speed is what you're looking for, speed, ease of use, and sort of maintainability. And
and WordPress.
Yeah, then WordPress. WordPress is something which is, again, like Joe said, it's going to be something which is, it's very simple to get up and running. I personally haven't done much WordPress. I've done it here and there when I needed to. A client offered me a certain amount of money, so I was like, screw it, why not? I might as well go ahead and take his job. So I pretty much did it. But a lot of people I know become so good at WordPress that they can just accept a job, boom, they do that job, accept another job, do it, accept another job, do it. Before you know it, they've cleared 20,000 in a month. And I'm not joking. I've seen people do that. And it's wow. Okay. So it really doesn't matter if you're doing JavaScript or whatever. If you're clearing that kind of money, then you're doing something right. So I would say WordPress is something which is, It's definitely, there's value in it, right? Shopify is another one which is actually not spoken about enough. Shopify is something which, if you get good at Shopify, there is so many e-commerce websites out there. Or like what I would say is recommended is if you guys actually have sort of an entrepreneurial mindset and you kind of want to do something outside the box or sort of want to start your own little company up or something like that, I would recommend, honestly, find local businesses near you. And this is something which Gary Vee sort of proposes as well. Like, go ahead, find local businesses around you. And for example, let's say you found a bike shop and they have a terrible website. Yeah. Go ahead, implement an entire little build in Shopify. Be like, look, this will collect payments. You can pretty much add products. You can add the bikes. You can add parts. It pretty much manages all your customers. It does everything for you. I've built it for you. You can decide what you want to pay me if you want to have it. Yeah. And pretty much do that enough times. And one, you're going to learn the skills to sort of close clients. You're going to learn how to sort of build that sort of soft skill approach. Pair that with the soft skills book by John Somers and you have a really nice thing going.
I love it. I've started reading it and so damn good.
Really
like
good book.
Specification thing, I did it from here.
Yeah, really, really good book. So I would say that's one thing. So WordPress is going to be useful in that sense. Shopify, again, something which is going to be, again, if your goal is money, then honestly, that's kind of a good way to go, right? Then you can sort of build up some money, which buys you time. And then, of course, you can go ahead and learn something like React and build your skills when you have that time. But some people are definitely sort of more, they need to make money quick. So WordPress, Shopify, good approaches to solving that. Now, another thing is Webflow. Webflow is relatively new. I've seen loads of adverts on it. Webflow allows you to do the entire process. So you can pretty much design the app. So imagine a client came to you and said, like, I want an app built. You can pretty much go ahead and say to them, okay, I'm going to design it in Webflow. I believe you can do that pretty quickly in Webflow. I think that's what they kind of built it for as well. And then you can pretty much,
you can like design and then like it builds the front end for you.
Yeah, exactly.
So like it like builds the HTML, CSS, JavaScript, everything, and like clean code.
Yeah, exactly. Like it will go ahead and actually build it out for you as well. So that's going to be really, really handy. And then it will basically take that design that you can pretty much show them mock up sort of that sort of stuff. And then you can go ahead and translate that to code. Now that actually plugs and plays. I think it can convert the code to React, I think, as well in Webflow. I'm not sure, but I think you can do that. They also got CMS, which means that you can actually manage data flow and stuff like that with Webflow. And then you can actually deploy with Webflow. So you see things like Shopify, things like Webflow, things like the other one. What was the first one we said? WordPress, yeah. So all that stuff, is like good if you want to make money as a freelancer and that sort of route. And again,
and now, Sonny, I can guarantee you that there are going to be people in the comment section who's just going to be like, oh, then why are we learning React? Why are we learning JavaScript? Why are we learning everything like that? So you should, I think that will be helpful for some people.
Yeah, I would say like in that case, honestly, guys, like again, it comes down to the point where like you could pretty much go ahead and learn. Just like you could become a CSS guru and you could get paid bucks for being so good at CSS and not know anything about React, but you're just a CSS guru. Like you see, it really doesn't matter sometimes about the skill. It's about how much value that skill can translate to and provide someone else. What's up, Corey? Hey, dude. Yeah, so it's all about like sort of like how much that value can bring to someone else. And that's going to pretty much determine what the sort of return will be for you. So it doesn't matter whether it's WordPress or something like that. But the reason why React is so hot is because React is the #1 most wanted language. So the jobs are flying right now. The pay is huge. It's fun to code in React. It's extremely powerful. You can take React, go ahead and take it to React Native, pretty much build iOS native apps, Android apps. You can build web apps. You see like it's immensely powerful and you can pretty much do everything. In Webflow, you still have restrictions, like as in you're still pretty much using a drag and drop sort of with some custom coding you can still probably add in. But you need to make sure that like, again, if clients are, for example, before Uber was built, you wouldn't go on Webflow and kind of build Uber, right? Like as in, you see what I mean? Like there's a need to know bespoke programming to solve bigger problems, bigger apps.
I think that clears a lot of stuff out for some people, because some people are just like, okay, I'm gonna learn WordPress and I'm gonna like just get coding in the trash. I'm just gonna do all this all day, and it's not just about that. It's about the uniqueness. Like React is highly customizable, and I might be wrong, but sometimes WordPress might not be that customizable. Say that you're building the next Uber, as you said, or something like Airbnb.
Yeah.
Well, maybe sometimes WordPress might be helpful, but most of the times you want to enable extreme amount of customization, and for that purpose, I don't think that anything is better than code itself.
Yeah, so it's a balance between code and value. As in, like, if I would recommend literally, I would actually recommend if your route is to go in freelance and take on jobs, and WordPress is a quicker way of pumping out websites, go ahead and learn WordPress. You know, but in terms of landing a full position, learning WordPress isn't going to get you like a secure job. As in, like, it may get you a job somewhere, but in terms of in comparison to React, it's not even close.
WordPress is like the quick solution to anything. Like, you're building a e-commerce website, just quickly do a Shopify thing, and then you're good.
Yep.
But say that you're in for the long term, then of course React.
Yeah, exactly.
Or JavaScript in general.
Awesome.
Sonny, I have one question for this regarding this only.
Okay.
See, as far as clients are concerned, when clients have certain requirements, then we sometimes refer Shopify or Wix or WordPress, and we can make him a website for as he wanted.
Yeah.
But when his needs are something different, he says that I want certain different customization as per his different needs. Then sometimes these kind of website don't have those specifications.
Yeah, you need to
So
know.
in that scenarios, if you are a person who has got knowledge of React, so does the knowledge of React is useful there? We can customize these platforms, WordPress, Wix websites.
So remember, like, you need to remember that, like, every single conversation encounter client is different, which means that, like, if somebody comes to you with a WordPress website, you can't just be like, okay, I'm going to somehow plug React in. You see what I mean? Like, as in, if they have a WordPress website, you probably, chances are you're going to just be adding to their WordPress website and adding functionality and stuff like that. I haven't worked with, I mean, you might be able to combine the two. I haven't done that. But the point is that, like, if you have freelance clients, if you have somebody who just comes to you and says, I have an idea and I want it executed on, because a lot of times when I have conversations with a client, it's pretty much kind of a conversation of, remember, we look at it in terms of, we know that, okay, there's React, we know there's WordPress, we know there's Shopify, right? But somebody might have an idea and they might have some money and they might be like, look, I just want to get this thing built. I have an idea, I have a vision of what I want. I have no idea about tech and all this stuff. So then it's up to you to say, like, it's up to you to be, then kind of put yourself in a position to say, like, okay, if it's an e-commerce they're after, a website they're after, maybe Shopify is going to help them out. Right? Maybe Shopify is going to be the quickest, most reliable, scalable route. They pretty much can go from zero site to up and running, selling products within a day. Now, if you said to do the same thing in React, I can't guarantee it'll be a day. And it probably look like shit if it was in a day. As compared to Shopify, it would look literally perfect in a day. Like if you put the work in. So you see the trade-offs can be in that sense. But that's all the questions we're going to take for now, guys. Let's go ahead and let's jump into some functional stuff, because that was actually an awesome Q&A. And if you're watching this on YouTube and you found value from that, go ahead and smash the thumbs up.
Dude, that was at least $500, I swear.
Awesome, dude. Nice. Right, so now I'm actually having fun today because I've got yesterday, just to tell you guys a little quick break before we go into that, I actually went ahead and bought a so I had a mouse, right? And I use this MX Master Mouse, and it's how I do all the drawing and stuff like that. It's got all these buttons on and stuff like that. But yesterday I was sitting there doing a bit of work, and then the thing died, and I was like, I couldn't figure out why it died, and I charged it and everything. So, oh yeah, Pedro uses it as well. And I freaked out, and I was like, shit, I'm going live tomorrow. How the hell am I going to draw on the screen without my mouse? And I ordered it, and luckily Amazon saved the day with the new one. So this is a new version. So it's
so good. So version 3, is it?
Yeah, this is MX Master 3. Super silky. Yeah. Yeah.
So believe it or not, I bought my own mouse, like literally from my own money. I bought it.
Well
it was
done,
on
dude.
Amazon Basics, yeah.
Nice.
So it was like a need for me because I was like making websites and like web designs, Instagram posts. So I needed it. So I just said to my dad that, hey, I need it, and I won that prize from my competition from my school, and I got some money from there. So I just said, I just told him that I'm gonna order it, and I just ordered it, and it was like a great feeling, like ordering my first thing on my own. And this is highly valuable, you know. Like my sister is using it all day, all night.
Yeah,
I'm using it all day, so it is
honestly,
an asset for me.
Yeah, and this is something I want to start off with this next portion, guys. So the next thing we're going to talk about is things which can make your life easier in terms of coding and stuff like that. So like, it's pretty much I'm going to show you the development environment so that you guys can code easier. But literally, like Priyanshu said, like it's like an investment in yourself to sort of like upgrade your equipment. So in this case, like a mouse, right? We all overlook a mouse. We all use a trackpad. Well, I don't need a mouse. Like the point is that like this little thing speeds up my entire workflow.
Makes my life so easier.
Like as in,
the touchpad sucked like anything. Like moving one component from another, damn, it was so hard.
Yeah, as in like literally like,
how people do using means like touchpad. It's so hard.
To be fair, I've used I do even when I'm like on a plane or something like that. I just literally use touchpad. So in whatever works for you, make it work. But what I would say is this is something that Kazi actually sort of drilled into my head, and it's changed my entire outlook. And since I've done it, the returns have been nothing but great for me. So if you are on a debate, right? So let's say you need a screen, right? You need a new screen, and right now you're just working off of one screen, and you have the money, but you're on the fence, and you've kind of been debating for a while. We've all been there, right? We've all been in that situation. Yeah. I get off the damn fence and just buy the screen. Like this is literally what I'm saying. Like I know it can be a conversation of, I'm literally the person who was sitting there with Kazi. I'm like, Kazi, it's expensive, man. You know, like
that mic, right?
Yeah, like as in this. This mic. As in, I remember when Kazi said like, should we upgrade it? I was like, dude, it's expensive. Like the headset's expensive. Like the lights, everything's kind of pricey. But then it's like invest in yourself, invest in your skill set. Like, and I know it sounds silly. The lights, yeah, okay, the lights are fancy. My girlfriend bought me those, but they look cool. But.
Amazing,
Yeah, but like things like literally like the mouse, things like your screen. Like in front of me, I have a huge ultra wide right now, and it was an investment. And since I've had this ultra wide, I pumped out 25 clones. So it's literally a case of like, do you see what I mean? Like, and if I didn't have the screen, I'm telling you, the clones would have taken me a lot longer, and it would have been a lot tougher to go ahead and do that. So I would recommend that you do just like, if you're on the fence with things like that, get off the fence, invest in yourself, and the returns come. Like don't even like stress about it. Like the returns will come because it will speed up your productivity, speed up your skill. With that said, let's go ahead and jump into today's session.
Let's go.
So I want to show you guys. So last week we talked about Redux, right? Now Redux, if we all know, I'm not going to go into the pattern of Redux, but I'm going to show you use cases of Redux. And then afterwards, because it's recorded, you guys can pretty much go ahead at your own pace, go ahead and do stuff and kind of run through it. Give me 2 seconds, guys.
Fun fact, my React app was just made after so long.
Oh, nice. So now, guys, we're going to go ahead and click getting started with Redux. Okay, so this is it. Now, Redux getting started has never been easier than it is right now. So we literally do npx create React app. We name it and then use this command --template Redux, and it will set everything up. So I'm going to go ahead, copy this, pull up a terminal, right? Pull up a terminal. So in a second,
I have to make my React app again.
Let me go ahead and say terminal. Here we go. And here I'm going to go.
What would you like to say?
And here I'm going to say the app is called, let's just call it, I'm not going to do it here actually. I'm going to go ahead into a correct directory. So let me go into,
By the way, it's another good skill to master the command line. If anyone's interested, they should definitely do it because you can do so much with the command line.
Yeah, command line literally is going to be an investment in yourself to go ahead and do that, because if put it that way, that's another test. If you feel really uncomfortable in the command line, I've been there. Trust me, I was once at a point where I was in university, and again, I am somebody, like, disclaimer, who went to university, and I wouldn't even recommend somebody else to go to university now. I think what you're doing right now, by being here, by literally just being surrounded by people who want to learn and who are actually taking action, is much more valuable than any sort of degree or masters or anything. And take it from somebody who did the degree, did the masters, did all that shit. I wouldn't go, like, if I knew what I knew now, I would have saved the money. And I would have just did a course like this. I would have gone ahead and just actually done stuff. as opposed to doing it that way. So
there's actually a big quantity about this, and I would like to say to anyone who's like in the fence of going to college or not. So if you're going to a college like a community college or something, don't go for it. Just invest in yourself in something else. But if you're getting an offer from something like Stanford or Harvard, why aren't you in it? Seriously, like that's the level of colleges that you're targeting. And if you're getting those jobs, then if you're getting those offers, then don't miss it out.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Like Stanford and like Harvard and those type of colleges are really expensive, aren't you?
But still, like it's worth it. It's worth it.
I mean, it still depends on what the situation.
Honestly,
is.
I would say.
Isn't like the industry still expects like you to have like a degree and masters and MBA kind of thing?
No. FANG doesn't require that anymore.
Yeah, so
why I am suggesting anyone to go to Stanford or something is because it's not about the degree, it's about the experience.
Yeah, exactly. If you could tell them that you can work on a website, you can do a bunch of stuff, like Redux, this, that means a lot more. Honestly, when I used to interview people who were coming to join like the company that I was in and things like that, I wouldn't even I didn't even care about the degree that they did. Like and anyone who said like, oh, you need a first class degree to be here, I don't want to be a part of that team. Like, as in, because that's not a good developer space, in my opinion. Like the people who say like, you don't actually need a degree, but like, what do you know? Have you got the open mindset of learning? That's the team you want to be a part of. Right, not the team that's like, oh, what's your GPA? What's your like, it's just like, it's just silly, So, let's go ahead and jump into this. So, yo, I keep hearing someone say hello.
Okay, that was me. I was making sure you can hear me.
Oh yeah, yep.
Yeah, we can hear.
I had a question.
Who is that?
Nathan.
Okay, what's up, Nathan?
So, I'm new. This is my first day, and it's supposed to be an onboarding.
Welcome, dude. Yeah.
Yeah, but the link for the onboarding on Facebook is not working.
The onboarding was actually, I think it
was postponed to tomorrow, I believe.
Oh, really?
Oh.
Okay.
Because there was some scheduling. This is just only for this week. And you're right, Nathan. The onboarding calls are always on a Monday. But for this week, I think there was some scheduling conflict. And I think Rishi sent out a thing on Slack.
Yeah, Rishi sent that. The onboarding was today at 9.
Today at 9.
Today at 9.
So as far as I was aware, the onboarding was at 9 a.m. PST, and then it was a 2-hour onboarding, and then it would have been the coaching call. So I'll catch up with Rishi afterwards and figure out what happened there. But regardless, welcome, Nathan. Welcome to the course. And also, there will be an onboarding. I would speak to Rishi about that, but just keep an eye out in the chat, and you'll see the onboarding.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my last question is, what got me to really sign up for the course was the clones that you make.
Yep.
And I was wondering, how did you get the clone to look exactly like the existing one? The CSS and the styling and the assets and all that?
So it's literally a case of dialing in on skills like Flexbox, dialing in on CSS skills and that sort of stuff, and then actually going ahead, looking at the final product. In some cases, I would inspect the actual website, see what they use, see what colors they're using, use color pickers and things like that, match it closely to what they do. And what I'll do is I'll even stream it one day when I'm building live. I think that'll be cool for everyone to see. You'll see the reality of the build. So
because I know there's an app called Site Sucker, which literally will suck everything, like the assets, the designs and everything.
No, so I don't use anything like that. And to be honest, what they do is it's not going to give you a proper code base or like anything. It's going to give you like some weird because a lot of these sites don't actually, it's server side rendered and then delivered. So even what you get is not going to be the actual site, because when you go on the site, it pulls the information that it needs. So the way it wouldn't actually suck the site in the correct way. So I actually go ahead and I just visually look at a site and I'll kind of clone it, and I'll build it.
That's dope.
Thanks, dude. Yeah.
All right.
Sonny, you use inspect to kind of see what they're doing, right? Like how Nas does it. He goes into inspect.
I do in the beginning. I did in the beginning, and then I got really good at kind of getting a knack for it. And then, but what I'll do is I'll show you guys, I think what I'll do is either on Twitch or on YouTube or something. But when I do a build, maybe not this week because we've got 2 big videos this week, Thursday, Friday. But what I'll do is I'll go ahead and stream it, and that will be really handy for you guys to go ahead and see the reality of what's behind the scenes when I get stuck, what I do, and that sort of stuff. Because trust me, there are times where it's like 4 hours, 5 hours, I'm sitting there, I'm just coding, and I go into a little Zen state, and I just kind of chuck music on, and you just code. So cool, yeah.
With Sonny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I added user authentication and a sign-in page to the Netflix clone that you did.
Dope.
And it took me a while, but I managed to make it look exactly like the sign-in page.
Nice,
and it was a good practice to do that.
Dude, that's awesome, man. And that's what I would say. It's like literally take the clone and go with it and build things on top like Pedro did. Like literally go ahead and do it. Like literally go ahead and take it to that next level. And that's going to be the difference of what actually goes ahead and takes it from you just clone something to you remembering now, because you probably would have had to extend on it, add on things, really understand the code to kind of go ahead and build on it. So that's dope, dude. And I'd recommend everyone does that if you work on a clone. Yeah. Awesome. So with that said, let's go ahead and create a React app. So I'm going to go ahead and do npx create React app, and then I'm going to name the app just to say Redux tutorial. And we're going to say template Redux, and then I'm going to hit enter. And all this is going to do is it pretty much create React app is a tool provided by Facebook. It pretty much goes ahead and sets up the entire React app, and then the -- template Redux basically sets it up in a way of having everything orientated around Redux, like sort of. So for those of you who don't know what Redux is essentially when we have data inside of an app. So I'm going to give this a quick rundown because we do explain this in quite a lot of videos. But Redux is essentially when you have an app. So in React, you have component-based design, right? So everything's components. So if you have a header, it's a component. If you have a product, it's a component, things like that. So when you have a component-based design, imagine the first thing you have is the app component, right? This is the first thing that loads, and everything is kind of like generated underneath this. Now, obviously you can change this so it's not the app component, but I'm just sort of assuming that we don't. And then imagine like underneath this, you had like a header. So let's go ahead and say we had like a header. We had a few other things. So we had a header, we had like a sidebar. Oh man, you get really quick at doing this stuff, but like still you never get it right fully. But sidebar, and then underneath that, imagine like inside the sidebar you had like things like
login.
Yeah, let's just exaggerate, and for now I'm just going to say product, right? For some reason in the sidebar you have a product, so it could be like an advert or something.
That's so weird.
Yeah, and then like here, I mean, in some cases you have like adverts where they have products inside the sidebar. So here you could do this, for example, and then say inside the header, or like let's just say here you have let's call it a checkout page, right? So imagine you've got another page which is checkout. Now here, imagine you have products as well, right? So you see like component-based design, the beauty and benefit of it is that you can write one component, aka this one, and this one, and it's pretty much, so this one, and this one, and it's pretty much a case of you just reuse the component, right? Now imagine we log in, right? So let's go ahead and say we had another component over here, and this one's called login, right? So this is a login component. Now when we log in, I have the user at this point. So imagine I log in, I now have a user, but my user in the code is over here. So he's literally over here, as in like he's in some kind of variable in the login component. Now we can basically go ahead and pass it down. So we can kind of like have a variable here, pass it down, set the user, and then we have access to it here. And then I can pass it down here to the product. Imagine we needed the user's information whenever we interacted with the product. Then I would pass it down here. Then I would also pass it all the way over here and here. Now you can see what happens is the user kind of gets thrown everywhere, right? It's kind of a headache, and we call this headache prop drilling. So whenever you run into something like this, we call it prop drilling. And this is a headache. We don't want to do that, right? Because then what happens is the user goes from here to like here to here. It goes down here, and it just becomes messy, and you get this nasty like tree of crap going on, and you don't want that. Instead, what we do is we introduce something like a data layer. So imagine like we wrap the entire app, and this is essentially, just think of this as just call it Redux. No? Okay, so let's just say Redux. And the purpose of Redux is that when we log in, what I can do is I can basically throw the user into this layer, right? So the user is now just thrown into this layer. Now this layer obviously surrounds the entire app, which means that what I can then do is I can do powerful stuff like pretty much, because the user's in the data layer, so it's pretty much around the app. If I need it here, I can just pull the user in at this point. You see? So here I can actually just go ahead and grab the user. I don't need to do any of this weird sort of pulling it around. Even here, if I need the user, I can just go ahead and pull the user, right? And it works two ways. So like imagine if at this point I add a product to the basket, I can just add the product to the basket. And then in here, I can pretty much have a basket. And we modify the basket. And now if I need the basket for some reason in the header, you know, like in some apps like Amazon, you have the basket icon in the header. I can pretty much just go ahead and pull it from here. So I can just go ahead and say, give me the basket from here. So you see, like it creates this uniform, this very maintainable structure to our code where basically we can pass a variable in a global like fashion. So pretty much if we have a variable over here, I just throw it inside the data layer or inside the Redux store, we call it, or slices of the store. And then pretty much you can just use it wherever you need to use it. Okay. So we pretty much just went ahead and created the React app. So I'm going to go CD Redux tutorial and now I'm inside. Now I'm going to show you guys a little trick. So I'm going to go ahead and say code, and I use the insiders edition, but you guys, it will just say code dot. So code dot, but I'm going to do code insiders dot, and that will go ahead and pull up a Visual Studio Code. Again, I'm using the insiders edition. You guys will have the normal one. And here you'll pretty much have everything set up for you. So I'm going to go ahead and make this a bit easier for you guys to read by popping it over here. And
in order to do code dot, don't you have to add it to your path first?
Yes, you do. So in order to do that, you have to do Command Shift P, right? And then type in shell command. And again, because I'm using the beta version, it'll say install code inside as command in path. But for you guys, it will say install code command in path. You need to do that before you do that little trick. Okay. So that's going to help you guys out a lot.
You don't need that in Windows, by the way.
You don't need that in Windows.
Yeah, because Microsoft made it, you know, it might just be a built-in function.
No, it by default adds it to path while installing.
Nice.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Because it's like Windows.
Yeah, I don't know. It did not work for me when I had PowerShell. I was having issues, and I helped Sayuri the other day. She was having the same issue. She was on a Windows 10 machine, and she was using PowerShell as a terminal.
I am also having the same issue.
So we had to add a small thing to our path.
Yeah.
We found it on Stack Overflow, and then it got working.
Yeah, you have to add like an alias or something.
When you install it, there is an option at the bottom in the installer that add to the path. There is a tick box.
I highly recommend for Windows users to use the Bash terminal because it has all the functionalities and uses the same commands as Linux and
except for
Mac as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you don't need to use sudo. Yeah, but it's basically the same, but it's very useful.
Yeah. Exactly. Now, guys, for this next bit, I'm going to do a deep dive. So I'm literally just going to go ahead and I'm going to mute everyone. And again, you can unmute yourselves if you need to ask questions and stuff like that. But we're going to go heavy on this bit. So this is focus mode. So literally everyone, like, get ready because it gets quite heavy, right? So it's going to get quite heavy and in terms of like understanding and things like that. So I just want you guys, don't even try and follow along because remember, it's recorded. So you can literally go ahead and watch the video back at another time, do it at your own pace. But at this point, I want you guys to really, really focus because it's about to get really, really sort of intense at this point.
So save all the questions for the end so you're not interrupted?
Yeah, so let's try and save the questions to the end. And then what I would say is, if there are good questions, any of the co-hosts or it would be awesome if you just literally just kind of get a few of them on sort of Slack or something like that. And we can pretty much just, sort of pile them up. Dope.
Mm-hmm.
So with that said, guys, now what we're going to do is we go into our source. I press Command J or Control J if you're on Windows. And then you're going to go here and do npm start. Okay. Now this is going to spin up the app. And then what I'm going to do is make myself a little bit smaller in the corner so that way everyone on YouTube doesn't get blocked as well. Okay. And now, okay, so I've got another app running. I was doing another job. So this is going to run on 3001 now. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to go to app.test. I'm going to get rid of the app.test.js. I don't really want test files. I'll keep the logo for now because I want to show you guys something. Get rid of setup tests, right? So it says compiled successfully. So I go back here and boom, we have the first app running. Now you can see this is a counter app. So I've got a plus. I've got a minus, and I've got an add amount and add async. So let's go ahead and add 2, and you see it adds 2 every time. If I go ahead and change this to 20, click add, it adds 20 to that amount, right? If I click add async, you see there's like a delay, because anything asynchronous means that there's like a delay. So imagine we're making like a network request or something like that, then it has a little delay before it goes ahead and does it. So what makes this different to the original Create React app? Basically, the value here is not stored inside of simple state. It's stored inside of the Redux store, okay? So it's inside of the Redux store. And I'm going to go ahead and just quickly get rid of this, get rid of this. So this is actually stored inside of the Redux store. So this right here, this counter is actually going to go ahead and it's part of that data layer. So remember we drew out that sort of data layer where we had the apps, and remember you had like all the components like that I drew out, and then you had that data layer that wrapped it, right? So this number is pretty much stored in that data layer, and it's stored as the counter, I believe, right? And then what we do is when we need it, we just pull it from the Redux store. So I'm going to go ahead and clear this. There we go. Yeah, nice. So what I'm going to do now is going to go to our code, and I'm going to go ahead and check it out. So app.js, so I'm going to use Command J to hide that. And here you can see we've got a bunch of stuff happening in here. So this is pretty much edit, app, and save to reload. So you can see this is where we're seeing all of this stuff. Now you see at the top, we've got this counter component. So what I'm going to do is, and this is also an example of me going through code that imagine like I had never seen this before, because last time that I had the coaching call was the first time I actually saw this template. So I'm going to show you guys how I would jump through it. So I'm going to hold Command and just click it, and it takes me to the counter file. Now inside of here, I can see a bunch of stuff. Now, naturally, you're going to freak out. You're going to be like, oh my God, what the heck is going on in here, right? But what I would say is don't freak out. You're going to see things like selector, right? Selector is something which we're going to talk about. You're going to see things like dispatch. Dispatch is something we're going to talk about. And then you see things like use state. Now, use state is obviously a React hook. Now, React hook is something that, and also thank you very much, Ian26, for the nice words on YouTube. Use state is something called a React hook. And now, for example, remember what we said, how we had those components earlier, right? So you had those different components on a web page. Now, if we have a component, each component can have like a little memory, right? So it can have its own little memory. So this one, imagine this one had like a little counter in it, right? So it had like a number 1, and this one had like a number 4, and this one had like a number, I don't know, it could be 3, for example, right? And they had like a plus and minus button on each one. Now, each one can have its own memory, and we call this state, okay? So it's the state of the component. So in this case, it could be like the state, let me go ahead in a minute. We have the state of the component. So here, we can have like, this one is also going to be the state, okay? So state, yeah. And then we can also, that's how every sort of component can keep track of what's going on. So what you see here pretty much is something called state, okay? Now, let's go ahead and dive a bit more in. So we can see we've got a button with a plus, a button with a minus, and then we've got a span tag with the number in. So this bit here is referring to this bit over here. Yeah, so you got the plus, you got the button, the minus, and you got the count in between it, right? Now, if you don't believe me, I can go ahead and prove it. So I'm gonna say, told you I'm not lying. Probably spelled lying wrong, but anyway. Let's go refresh. See, told you I'm not lying. And it's there, okay? So we can see that that's pretty much where the code's running. So honestly, I would say when you're even going through your code yourself, make sure you actually go ahead and literally do stuff like that, because it will help you understand that, okay, that's where it's happening too, you know? But what I would say is, so we have that. And then we have set increment amount, set decrement amount. So at this point, we can ignore all this stuff. What I'm interested in is this plus and minus, right? Now, the way Redux works, right, is, again, remember we had those components. So we had things like little components, and then we had that little tree. Remember we had like the app.js at the top, and we had a bunch of stuff underneath it where everything gets rendered out. And then we had the data layer, right? Now, remember where we had the login. So imagine like we had the login the user gets like pulled in from the login component. And then we basically push that into the data layer. Now, in order to do this, we do something called we dispatch. So we dispatch the user into the data layer, right? So this, when we refer to this as what we do is we dispatch an action, right? And then think of it as this entire data layer. Oh, Niam, thank you very much for a donation. He goes, you are doing an amazing job. Request you please make a live trading website like Robinhood. Okay, we can do that. Thank you, dude. So we can dispatch an action, and this data layer has to kind of like listen to what's going on. It needs to like have some kind of idea as to like, okay, you just dispatched some kind of like set the user action. So I need to know what to do with that. So what we do is we call that reducer, right? And this basically has something called a reducer. And what the reducer does is it just basically listens for actions, right? So this is the job of a reducer. It just listens for actions. So we have this dispatching of actions. We have a reducer, which listens to actions. And then remember, the final part of the flow is like, say this component needs the user. Then we have a way of mapping it, right? So then we have the user itself. So in our example, we had the count, right? So over here, we're using some kind of count. Now you can see this is where that mapping is happening. So you see where we have this over here, where it maps back into the source. So remember here we logged in, we just like dispatch. So imagine like this was the counter and we press plus or minus. We're dispatching a new value for the counter. So I'm going to go ahead and change this now to be counter. So it's relevant to what we're talking about. So counter, and then here we're pulling from the counter, right? Now, to get the information, good practice is to use something called a selector, right? So we use a selector to pull this information from the store, from the Redux store, okay? Now, you don't have to use a selector. You can literally just kind of grab it in a different way, but selector is a good practice to use, okay? So you can see we've kind of got a few different things happening here. We've got like this 1, this 2, and then this 3, right? And this is kind of what forms this is when I was saying, remember I was talking about a pattern before, and how once you know that pattern, you can pretty much go ahead and use it regardless if you're doing React Context API or regardless if you're doing Redux, right? So in this case, number 1 would be dispatch the action. So let's go ahead and say that this had a plus, this had a minus, right? So in our context, we would talk about, in our case, we have here, the plus button is where we would dispatch, right? So let's go ahead and make it. So imagine this was a plus button, right? You would basically increment the counter, and that would push an action in, and it'll be some kind of increment action. So you see here, we're dispatching an increment, right? So again, don't worry too much about like, oh, what code is he using there? Just remember, try and get a grasp of the pattern that I'm talking about, right? So we have this. So when we click that plus button, right? So I'm going to change color. So when we click that plus button, it dispatches that increment counter, right? So going back here, it dispatches the increment counter on click of that button, right? And then the same happens for minus, but we dispatch a decrement action, right? Now, where does this get like listened to? Like, and we'll touch on this in a second, but we actually use the count value here. So remember, we dispatch some kind of count of, and then we kind of pull it in here. And obviously we've named it incorrectly here. It should actually be count. So just go ahead and fix that so it's clear. And then we got this. And then now you see here, we've got the actual count itself. And remember, like I said, we use a selector to go ahead and get the count. Now, again, don't worry about the code. Just try and remember that this is the pattern that we're doing. So we use a selector to pull the information from the Redux store. So don't worry about the middle step. Just remember, we dispatched an action, it changed the Redux store, and then we use a selector to go ahead and pull it inside of wherever we need it. And in this case, we're just pulling it inside of that piece of text here. So it's like here, right? Now, with that said, how does number 2 happen? So where does the action translate to actually changing the data layer? And that's where the reducer happens, right? So to jump into that, we're going to go into features. We're going to go into counter, and we're going to basically just look at their code and we're going to see what's going on. So it's counter slice, and this is where the magic happens, right? So in Redux, the way it works is it's good practice to split up. So imagine this data layer, this huge data layer, right? It's good practice in Redux to split the data layer up into something called slices, right? So we can split it up into slices. So split layer into slices. Now, what do we split into? Usually it's context specific, which means that if we have information about a basket, I would have a basket slice. If we have information about the user, I would have a user slice. So imagine like this is like an onion, right? And it has different layers of it. So inside of that layer, you can have information purely about the basket. Inside of another layer, you can have information purely about the user. Okay, but in our case, we've just got one for the counter. So it literally does nothing but has information regarded around the counter. Okay, now with that, what we're going to do is this is like boilerplate code. So it's not, in this case, we don't really care too much about going ahead and this sort of coaching call isn't about sort of diving into exactly the line of code. It's about understanding how to use the code from the template and then reuse it as we need it. And then you'll understand the pattern. And once you understand the pattern, it's very easy to go ahead and do things as custom as you need it to, right? So this is what we're going to name the slice. So this is counter. The initial value. So imagine that data layer, that slice in the data layer, that needs an initial value. So in our case, it's going to have a value of 0, right? So we're giving the counter a value of 0. And then what we're going to say is, in this case, I personally wouldn't call it value here. So I would say, I'm going to change this. I would call it count. This is a bad example. They shouldn't do this. I don't even think that's a good value. I would call it count, right? So in our case, we have an initial state and the count is 0, right? So we're talking about this count. So it needs some kind of beginning value when the app loads. So we're going to give it 0. Now, this is where part 2 happens, reducer. So remember, we dispatch an action when we click that button. So part 2 is where we listen for the action, okay? So here, we have different types of actions. So we have one action called increment, we have one action called decrement, and then we have that special one, increment by a certain amount, right? So the increment by a certain amount is actually where this magic happens. So where you can pretty much go ahead and pass it a value, and it goes ahead and modifies the store based on that, right? Now, let's go back to our code. Just give me one sec. God, it really dries you out when you're talking. Okay, we're back. So we have like 3 actions, right? We have increment, we have decrement, we have increment by amount. So you can see each one, all it takes as the sort of argument is it just needs to know what the current state is. So which is why this is called an arrow function. It just takes the state. Now again, the state is not the global state. It's the state for that slice. So in this case, we have the counter slice, right? So we have the counter slice, right? So in this case, the counter, and then we're creating a slice. So it's called the counter slice, okay? And then we give it a name which makes sense. So in this case, counter, right? So, right. So now what we're going to do is here, we pretty much have these 3 actions, and then we export them so that way we can use them outside of the app, right? So here you can see counter slice.actions. And again, like even here, for example, this is a clear example of where it doesn't make sense because we don't see .actions anywhere. But this is something that Redux, there's something that is called the Redux toolkit, and it makes our job a little bit easier because it basically goes ahead and they give us access to things like the actions, right? So we just define it in here, and then they pretty much make it in this very neat sort of format. So what we do is we go ahead and export it when we need it. And then you can ignore this one for now, the increment async. So forget about that for now. But then what we do is, so I want to show you guys. So when I click this, it's actually dispatching an event called increment, right? Now, if you don't believe me, I'm going to actually go ahead and show you the exact where it does that. So what we can do is we can go ahead and right click and click inspect. And then what we can do is we can go to this top thing here, click that, and we can click on Redux. So you need to install something called the Redux DevTools, right? The Redux DevTools are going to be really handy for you guys. So it's this right here, Redux DevTools. Yeah, so go ahead and install that. And that's going to make your life a lot easier when it comes to debugging Redux. And they're very powerful tools as well. So now to prove to you, so inside the code, we had inside of counter.js, when we click the button, so on click, it says dispatch, right? And look, and hooks, anything with use dispatch, use state, use whatever it is called a React hook. And they only exist in the functional component, not class-based. We're going to touch on that somewhere else, right? So now what we're going to do is here we have this dispatch, right? So again, don't worry too much about what's going on here. I'm just trying. You just want to go ahead and practice the use case of it. And now trust me, I know it's a bit kind of like, what's going on here, right? I know that it's kind of like I don't fully get it. But the way that you're going to get it is play with it. So literally, when you watch this video back, play with this and see for yourself, like get it working as you need to get it working, and then pretty much go ahead and it will make sense like that. But assuming that you're going to get it in one go, and if you don't get it by watching this video, is just the wrong way of thinking, right? It doesn't really work like that, right? So here what we do is when we click that plus button, we're going to dispatch an increment action. Now to prove that it does that, I'm going to click plus. And look, counter increment. So it just said inside the counter piece of state, an increment action was fired off. And then you can see the really nice thing about the DevTools is it actually shows you the counter piece of state and the count changed from 0 to 1. And if I click it again and I click this one, you see it changed from 1 to 2. And then you can see it changed from 2 to 3. Now, the awesome thing about DevTools is you can go back in time. So if I click this one and click jump, it actually rewinds the app. So you see I can actually go ahead and rewind the app to different points. And you can pretty much debug it in this way, which is really awesome, right? Now, so it dispatches, right? So remember we talked about it dispatches the action and the reducer listens. So now let's take a look at the reducer. So we just dispatched the increment action. And then here, remember all it's doing is it's saying, okay, now go to the state, go to the count and so state.count plus equals 1. So basically go ahead and add 1 to it. So if I change this to like 2, for example, now, every time I dispatch that increment action, it should add 2. Right? And now there is something that we need to know about inside of, so you would have seen me in React Context API, or if you do any of the clones, you would have seen me never ever manipulate things like this directly. Right? And that's what this big comment here is for. Because what we try to do, and this is something which you may go over your head right now, but it will make sense at some point in the future. We do something called, we don't like to mutate the state directly, right? We never like to do this. We never like to do like const name equals Sonny or something like this. Or I mean, even if you do like that, and then we don't ever like to do like this. Right, because this is called like, it goes against immutability, and basically immutability just means that you shouldn't really go ahead and, you shouldn't really have to go ahead and change stuff like this, especially when it comes to your state. Your state should be like, every change that happens in your state should be like a copy. So it should be like every time a change happens, that, and to prove that, the reason why it works is because look, every time a change happens, it basically copies it and creates a whole new piece of, like a whole new slice of state and replaces it with that slice of state. And that's why we can go back in time inside of our app, right? That's the only reason why I can go back in time, is because we have those copies, right? And that's really, really good practice. And you might be thinking, hang on, but it doesn't make sense because isn't that going to use up a lot of memory and stuff like that? It doesn't. They do it in a very clever way. So here, what we say is change the state by plus equals 1. And then decrement, as you can imagine, it's just doing the same thing, but it's doing negative, like minus equal 1. And then increment by amount takes the state, and it also takes something called an action, right? Now, this is the cool part. Now, what we can do is we can actually combine logic inside of our app, and we can say is, okay, so the state dot count plus or equal to the action dot payload. Now, where does this get fired off? So let's see where increment by amount gets fired off. So let's go to our counter. And we can see here is where add amount actually gets fired off. So if I change this to like 21,000 or something like that, you see it actually gets added there. So let's go ahead and find it. So down here, we can see increment by amount, right? And then what they're doing is they're passing a number in, and they're just doing some fancy stuff here. So they're saying, convert it to a number, the increment amount, and the increment amount is just simply an input field. So this box right here. So this is pretty much just like 1 or something like that. And then it's going to convert it to a number and just add it there. And then what we're going to say is dispatch increment by amount. And then you see like these ones, right? We don't, even though it takes state, we don't pass the state in. So in Redux, we don't do that, right? We just, it's very clever. It knows what it's doing, right? But when we have something called a payload, what you can do is you can just pass the payload here. So for example, in this case, if I was to change this to increment by amount 6, right? Now it's going to ignore whatever value I put inside of here, and it's just going to add on 6, right? And you can see if I click increment by amount, if I check the action that got dispatched, it dispatched an increment by amount and the payload was 6, right? So if I go back now and check inside of counter slice, you see, because state, remember, we don't pass the state. Redux does some clever stuff on the back end, so it knows like what the state is and things like that. But the action, we have something called the payload, and that is what we just passed in as a parameter here. Okay, so we've got number increment by amount like that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and create an entire new slice of state. And I'm basically going to have something else so we can pretty much see this from the ground up. So inside of app.js, on top of everything, I'm going to have h2 saying this is my name, right? And then let's go have a look at our code. So this is my name. And then I'm going to have an input field underneath it. So I'm going to have an input, type is text, and it's going to have some kind of input. So this is my name. So the goal here is to say Sonny, hit enter, and then I should see Sonny pop up here when I click the button, right? So I need to have some kind of button here. And this button will basically just go ahead and say update name in the Redux store. Okay. Now, how do we go ahead and create a slice of state, wire up the button, use like all the things we need to use to keep track of what I'm typing in and stuff like that, and do all that. So that's what I'm going to show you now, right? And this will actually go ahead and show you how to create an entire piece of state, just like the counter was. And then we're going to basically change it to do what we need to do here. So the first thing we need to do is go ahead and map our input. So here, every time I type in this field, I need to know what I'm typing in. So the way we do it is we go ahead and introduce something called state. So const, and here I'm going to say the input. So this is how you write a variable in React. Think of it like that. You say input, and then the convention is you say set, whatever the name was, so set input. You say use state. And then this has an initial value of blank because we typically don't have anything written in here. So the initial value is blank. And then we have to import it from React. So this should have just gone here actually. It didn't import it correctly, but that's a clean way of doing it. And now what we do is, this is something which you would have picked up on if you've seen the clones. But if you haven't seen the clones, I recommend you go back, rewatch them, and this will make a lot of sense. But inside the input, what you want to do is you say value of the input is our input variable, right? Now notice what happens now. If I go ahead and type in, so I'm banging on the keyboard, but nothing's changing over here, right? Nothing changes over here. That's because we need to actually keep track of what's going on. So we say on change. So every time the user types in, it fires off an event. So this is an arrow function. And then what we're going to say here is, we say, exactly, we say set input, and we say event.target.value. And what this is saying is set the input to whatever the user is typing in. So event.target.value is just a way of saying get the value of what they typed in. And then what this does is every time I type in, it goes ahead and set input is how we modify our value in the sort of the React way. And then this will cause the input to change, which means it re-renders and it shows you. So now if I say Sonny, so you see it starts to work, right? Because it's actually mapping to the React state, right? Now, the next bit. So I know when I click this now, the goal that we want is when I click it, it should say Sonny. And then that would like be our test case of saying, okay, Sonny was successfully added to the store. And you might be wondering, yeah, but Sonny, this isn't how real apps work. No, trust me, just understand fundamentals to this level and then really get the pattern kind of dialed in. Literally do it on the most silly basic examples, but get that repetition ingrained, and then you'll start to know the pattern, and then then you start to build on it, right? But what we're going to do now is we have a folder here called counters, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another folder called, is it count? Is there another folder here? No. Is that another folder? So here, I'm going to say, no, so it's not actually. Okay, so here I'm just going to create another piece of state, and I'm going to call this one, let's call this one the user, because it's a user slice. It's everything about the user, right? So we're going to call it user. And then what I'm going to do is I'm literally going to copy whatever was inside. No, sorry, this shouldn't be. I'm going to call this one the user slice. Sorry, it's going to be the user slice. And I'm going to grab all of the code from counter slice and I'm going to paste it here, because I'm assuming that I'm a complete beginner and I have no idea how to implement Redux. I'm just copying the template and I'm figuring it out as I go. So this is a good way of learning. So what I would say at this point, go here. You want to change this to be user slice. So if we click Command D, it does multi-tab, and we've got counter slice here, and counter slice here. So we're going to change this to be user slice. And you see it changed in all three places, right? Then I'm going to go here and change the name of that piece of state to be user. Now in here, we're going to have an initial state for that user. And we're going to basically say the user by default is going to be no. So it's going to be nobody, right? And then what we're going to do is we don't need a decrement. We don't need an increment by amount. We don't really care about any of that. In this case, I want an action called, let's just call it set user. So we're going to have a new action called set user, right? And this one's going to take so let's see how they did it before. They took an action. So here we're going to go ahead and this will take an action. Okay, so we'll have this and it'll take an action. Now, remember the action took a payload last time, so you could pass something along with it. And in the previous example, it was a number. In this example, we're going to pass a string, which is going to be the user's name. So here, I'm going to say, I'm going to get rid of all of this and get rid of all this stuff. I'm going to say, when you get a set user action. So for example, when this comes in, when we get a set user action, which it dispatches an action, we're going to say the reducer listens for the action. So this is where we listen for it. So when you get that set user action, we're going to say, go ahead and state.user should now equal. So state.user should now go ahead and equal the action.payload. Right, so we're just going to use this as a basic example. And now what we can do is I need to go ahead and change this to be exported. So we don't have this stuff anymore. And it's no longer called increment, it's called set user. So what we've done is we created a function that we can go ahead and use outside, so we can listen to when this action gets dispatched. Remember, we need to listen to it, and then we need to export it. So, and again, we don't need this increment async. And here, remember, the selector is the final part where we actually pull the value back in. So we need to create a selector here. So I'm going to create one. Go ahead and get rid of this comment here. And you can see our code is actually pretty simple. Actually pretty simple. I know the understanding is a bit complicated, but the code itself is actually super clean, right? So this is our selector, and here we say select user, I'm going to say, and this goes ahead and gets the state. But instead of doing state.counter, because it's not the counter slice anymore, and the reason why it was called counter before is because the name here was counter, right? So here it's user, so it's going to be state.user or in this case it's going to be the user. Right, but in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to be name. Yeah, so inside the user slice, we're going to have a name variable because that's kind of confusing. And then here we'll have set name, and then here we'll have set name. That kind of makes a bit more sense. Otherwise, it's going to be confusing for you guys. So we're going to say select name, and then here it says state.user.name. Right, now we've actually prepared everything. So what we can do is we can go into app. And then you see we actually have this store.js file, and we didn't look at this one before, but you see what the store.js file does is it's basically where we combine all of those different slices which make up this thing right here, right? This layer, this data layer. So here is where we basically pulled in the counter slice, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to change it to, instead of counter reducer, I'm going to say user reducer, and we're going to pull it from the user slice. Right, and here, it is inside of a counter folder. Okay, I'm not going to change that now, but we shouldn't be inside of a counter folder. It should be inside of its own folder. But what we're going to do now is we're going to say, we're going to go ahead and add a user slice. We're going to say the user slice should use the user reducer. And that's all you need to do to connect it. So now this doesn't have one layer in it. It has two slices, one for the counter and one for the user, right? And inside of counter slice, we handle all the stuff which could potentially change the counter. Inside the user slice, we have all the stuff which could potentially change the name. Now, if any of you guys have done the builds, you would at this point start to see where there's slightly some benefit to doing it this way, because you would see that the code's kind of split up based on the different contexts, right? It's split up based on like, and I see like Sairaj, like kind of, it was like a tick moment there. He was like, okay, that makes a bit of sense. Yeah, because like it splits up based on like, based on the context, and it kind of makes your code a bit more simple to understand, right? So at this point we have set name. What we're going to do is we're going to go to app.js, not app.js, yeah, app.js. And what I want to do is I'm going to go into counter.js and see how they actually used everything, because I want to use all the stuff as well. So I'm going to pull my app.js here. I'm going to pull it to the side maybe so we can see now. So on my left, I've got counter.js. This is where we have all the sort of counter logic here. And I'm basically got in app.js, I've got this is my name, the input, and that button where we want that test, right? The end goal is that I'm going to have a h2 tag or underneath it, which is basically going to say the name if there is one. Okay, so here, if I do h1, the goal is to have like a name pop up here, right? So in this case, it's going to bug out. It's like, whoa, there's no name, which is understandable, right? We didn't have a name. So what we need to do is we need to do a few different imports first. Now, I'm going to first go ahead and do import, and I'm going to import the selector. So that way I can actually use the user. So I'm going to say select user, or select name, sorry, it was select name from, and this is from the user slice. So this is actually from user. Sorry, this one should be inside of features / counter / user slice. Okay, so select name. And now what we can do is we can use this. So we can use this line of code. So we can say const, oh God, what have I done? Yeah, I can copy this line and I can change it for as we need it. So I need to import useSelector. So I've imported it from React Redux, right? And then instead of this, it's going to be the name. And we're going to use that name selector to go ahead and grab the value. So what this does now is this should actually go ahead and get that name for us, and it puts it inside this variable. And then what I can do is down here, I can have a big H1, let's just say H1, and let's say name. So if I do this now, there's no error, which is actually a good sign, right? So if I go ahead and look at the state right now, you see I've got two slices in the state, right? So inside that state, remember we set up two slices. We had the counter with the name and the user, which was the initial value was no. Now to show you that this is actually correct and it's not lying and it's not sort of like, I'm not faking this, let's go back to our user slice and let's change the initial value to, let's go ahead and say Sonny like this, right? Now the initial value is Sonny. So you see it's actually pulling it from our reducer, right? So that's going to basically go ahead and it proves that it's working at this point, right? So what we're going to do now is we're going to map it. So we want this to be node to begin with, but when we hit that button, I want to set the name based on whatever the user's typed in. Okay. So that's the next part. And you can see that like, this is what I'm trying to show you guys here is that this is kind of the approach that you're going to need to take when you're sort of breaking down a problem. So it might not always be a case of, like very clear thinking, and you're probably watching at this point and be like, oh shit, like I have no idea how the hell I'm going to actually do that in production, or I don't know how I'm going to actually use that. Trust me, just break it down, practice with these kind of examples, and once you get that pattern going, right, literally build silly apps like to-do apps and things like that with it, right? Like get things like that built, and trust me, like the confidence comes up and you start to solve more complicated problems, and we can get more kind of fine-grained into that sort of stuff. But at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead.
Things are like setting up boilerplates in Redux.
Yeah, so a lot of people hate setting up the boilerplate, including me. I hated setting up the boilerplate. But if you go ahead and use this template way, it actually sets it up with the latest sort of hooks and stuff like that. So this is, if you've used Redux before, anyone in the comments or anything like that has used Redux before, you notice this looks a bit different because this is like the sort of cutting edge frontline stuff. This is where they're using hooks, they're using all the modern stuff. So yeah, so what we're going to do now is I need to get that action, right? So I'm going to go here and I'm also going to import not just select name, I'm going to import the set names. Remember inside a user slice, we had this right here. So we had the set name. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to import that into my code. And what we can do is, remember, in order to be able to push something into the data layer, I need something called a dispatch. Dispatch is basically how you dispatch it inside the data layer. So to get the dispatch, we just use this nice little command here. So we say const dispatch equals use dispatch. So I need to just import that from React Redux. And now we have it. So now I have that gun that allows us to shoot values into the data layer. And then what I can say is when I click that button, so let's go ahead and say on click, right? I want to sort of, let's create a function called handle click, right? So everything kind of happens here. So I'm going to create a quick function up here saying handle click. And this is basically it's not going to take an event. And basically when we click that button, let's just test it and say, you clicked me. So let's just see if it actually comes through, right? So that's the first thing I would do. So I go here, console, click it, and it says, you clicked me, right? Now I want to test it and see if it keeps track of if our state over previously, if I click it and say, you clicked me, and then it should say the name. So let's go ahead and do this. We say, you clicked me input, because the input is what we mapped that entry field to. So if I save that, go back, and here I say, Sonny, update name. So you see, you clicked me, Sonny. And if I change this to like Priyanshu, so it says update name, you clicked me, Priyanshu, right? So you see like it changes based on this value now. Now that's cool, but we want to push that value into the data layer and then it should re-render and show it big and nice here. Now to do that is actually pretty simple because we've set everything up now. We go ahead and we just say dispatch because we want to dispatch an action. So literally we're at this point now. So when I click that button, I want to dispatch an action and I want to dispatch the set name action. And I want to pass in a payload, right? And the payload I want to pass in is going to be the input. So whatever their users typed in, right? So let's get rid of the console log. And now what should happen is this dispatches the set action with the input, right? This goes ahead and gets picked up inside the reducer. So the reducer goes, whoa, 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 you just shot an action. So it's going to go into step one. We're going to dispatch the action. Step two, the reducer is going to hear it and it's going to say, okay, change the state.name to whatever you passed in. So in this case, we passed the input in. Then the selector is used to pull the information back into wherever we need it. So we pull it in here. So use selector. And you can see we render it here, which means React is very clever. It will re-render where it needs to re-render. So at this point, what we can do is we can go ahead and test it. So now if I go ahead and say, Sonny, update name. Whoa, nice. If I go ahead and say like Alex, boom. And this is fully getting updated in the React store, Redux store right now. So if I go to Redux, I can see, look, it's shooting off a set name action. So let's go ahead and shoot another one off to prove it. Let's just go ahead and say, let's go say Hardeep. And I'm going to update name in the Redux store. So this one right here, right? So let's look at the action. And it says type was user. So it was inside the user slice. It was a set name action. So you see they even have really nice naming here. And the payload was Hardeep, right? Now the reducer picked it up. And if we click on the diff, it shows what changed inside the state, which is awesome. So it showed that it was Alex and it changed to Hardeep, right? And then what's really cool is that I can actually go back in time and I can change it back to those values, right? Which is really nice. Now that's literally, that's in a nutshell. Like, I know it seemed like a lot, right? But when you actually break this down, once you know that pattern, right? Once you know that pattern, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys, if I type in Redux right here, now, give me 2 seconds. I have a question. 2 seconds and I'll answer a question. So you see here, guys, where we have this right here. Yeah, where we have this where it says Redux, right? Oh, come on. Yeah, Redux right here. Yeah. So think about what's happening here. So look, just like I said before, so this is the diagram. So view is the component, store is what gets changed, and then you have an action which gets fired off. So an action which gets fired off, I prefer my diagram. I think it's a lot better than their diagram. So we have the action gets fired off. That's step one. Step two, a reducer picks up on it, right? So a reducer is kind of sitting there inside there listening, right? Step three, it manipulates the store in some way. So in this case, in our situation, it manipulated the store at this point. So remember, state is the same as store in this case. Store is an easier way to think of it. And then this is where the manipulation happens. And then the selector is the final part where it connects back. So you remember, you kind of have this cycle right here, right? Where it basically goes round and round and round, and it kind of keeps on happening. So if we go back and see, so we subscribe, and the subscribe is the selector. And then you see we're back to square one, dispatch. And you just have, this is the pattern I'm talking about, right? Now you can learn this pattern in the clones. So if you're literally looking, thank you, Wifey Mohammed. He says you're doing a great job and he donated $2. Thank you, dude. So if you learn this pattern, this is the pattern which will be the difference between you landing a job potentially and not landing the job. And I'm kidding you not, this is the pattern which is going to actually do that. So this is super valuable to know, Redux, right? This pattern right here. Why is it so valuable? It's because you can pretty much scale up an app pretty much with this sort of foundation underneath it. So once you have this in place, I know it looked like we did a lot, but if you get really fast at this, honestly, look at this. This is not actually that much code, and it's very scalable, right? And the best part is, like, you have a very simple store where pretty much this is where you combine all the, see that it just says configure store, the reducer, we just pass in this stuff, right? Now, Redux is a lot more powerful than just this. You can do things like middleware, which means that every single time something goes in. So imagine I went ahead and middleware in Redux is something really powerful. For example, every time I dispatch an action, I could put a point, like a process here, which says only do the next step if they're authenticated, for example. So you can do stuff like that in Redux, right? So it's very powerful. You literally can go into very intricate parts of it. And it's also very good for network requests, async, stuff like that. Now, what I want all of you to do is go ahead and actually give this a try. Okay, so like I want you guys to go ahead and, like, afterwards in your own time, in your own space, like, go ahead and give this a try. This is going to give you so many different skills by doing this, like this run through of what we did today, because what it shows you is we used React state here to keep track of what the user was typing in. We used the Redux store to go ahead and do the entire dispatching an action, right? We dispatched an action into a store. We created a new reducer. We created a new slice of state, right? We now understand somewhat more of the concept of what slices are inside of this Redux layer. And the whole purpose of slices is so that you don't have all the code in one place. Because as your code base gets bigger, like, I don't want to see every single action in one place. I just want to see all the actions for a user, all the actions for the counter, all the actions for the basket, right? And if you add a new feature on, think about it. If you have a team of 100 developers, but everything is nicely divided up, can you see how easy it would be to work on the same stuff at the same time, right? Or on different areas, because your code is structured in such a way that it allows you to sort of have that sort of working harmony between each other. So this is actually a really, really good sort of exercise for every single person to go ahead and try. I recommend that you all go ahead and give this a try, and pretty much, and you're going to run into bugs, you're going to run into problems, and that's where the learning sort of comes in, right? That's where you sort of pause the video, you dive in, you sort of you research about Redux and that this pattern, and the pattern that I'm talking about is this one. Now, I don't take it lightly when I say that that's so valuable. Like, as in, honestly, Redux is remember we talked about the skills that a front-end developer needs to go ahead and sort of succeed in their career. To get you kickstarted, if you go ahead and sort of practice so this is my hack for you guys, right? If you want to really sort of get an edge right now in terms of what's going to put you in the best position to get a job, right? So Pedro says, I just struggle with the syntax, like what to write. I get the concept, but not yet how to use it. So I 100% understand what you're saying. I literally would look like, for example, if you asked me to write that stuff off the top of my head, I wouldn't know. I would forget. Like, that's why I used the template, and I just pretty much copied this stuff and I just repurposed it to solve the problem.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, so what I would say is, in terms of understanding syntax, it's never about remembering. The point here is that if you understand that pattern that we spoke about, right, that sort of circular pattern that we sort of discussed, then it really doesn't matter about it doesn't really matter about the syntax. For example, you could go away from coding for an entire year and come back, and what you'll find as well, guys, is that this is a very modern approach to doing Redux. So this is using hooks, this is using a lot of stuff. But what you might see in actual production is something called map state to props, map dispatch to props, right? It's and what we will do, we will go through that at some point. But at this point, I just want you to use the elegant way, the really new way, the nice way, because this is the simplest way of doing it. But if you practice with this, you'll understand what that stuff is doing, because it doesn't matter about the syntax at that point, because you know what's happening under the hood. Once you kind of get your head around what's going on under the hood, the rest isn't really as important, right?
Hi, Sonny.
Yep.
I just have one question, then I have to leave.
Okay.
So when you're sharing your screen on React to the app, if you can share it.
Yep.
So in the input field,
what was that?
in your React app, Redux app.
Yep.
On the web browser.
Okay. So boom. Yep.
On your React, there in the input field, if you put spaces, will it still capture the space? Or empty space, completely empty.
As in like this?
If you clear that up and then just hit space, and then hit button, will it capture?
So yeah, it would get, and say let's do like a ton of spaces. So again, this now leads into something called validation. So like this is where you would protect against that sort of thing. So what you could do here is you can actually disable the button. So I'm going to show you a quick hack right now, and it's not a difficult hack. You literally go ahead, go to app.js, go to your button, and you say disabled if there is no input. And now check this out. So okay,
we use this in the buy now and the clone, right? We did the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Cool.
The Amazon clone for the buy now, so that we don't hit it multiple times.
Yeah, exactly. So you can do it there, but you see, it doesn't protect against the spaces. So you're gonna have to. There is a way to do that as well, but the point is that this will protect you from updating a blank value. So there is a way of doing the blank spaces as well. Or you could do something called trim. So it's .trim and then execute like the function that will actually trim out the white space. But yeah, so that's how you would go ahead and do that.
All right, thank you so much, Sonny, and thank you everyone. I just have to leave now. Gotta go.
Oh, dude, one sec before you go. That's how I just fixed it. So if you see, if I do the space and I add, so when I did disabled, you see here input.trim. That trims all the white space.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Welcome, dude. Nice. So yeah, so as like going back to Pedro's question, so again, yeah, so it really doesn't matter at that point about the syntax. Just try and learn the concept, which is why I teach the React Context API first. And Hardeep in the comments said this is a lot similar to React Context API. I'm seeing the pattern here. Redux is a little bit harder than Context API in my opinion. Yes, so Redux is a little bit more of a step up, which is why I say, because Redux, you now have multiple slices of state, but trust me when I say that's actually a lot better, right? You actually want to do that. You want to have your code split up in that way. But there is more code to write. Okay, there's actually more code to write. So I would say learn the React Context API, because you'll notice if you've done the clones, you would have seen like some kind of similarity between the dispatch, the sort of pulling it in, and that sort of pattern. You would see a similarity between the two. And then once you know that, it's not going to be like a strange thing, right? Priyanshi says, I was not able to understand syntax, although the main thing that was I got the good grasp of the data layer and I learned about the basic structure of Redux. That's what matters. Yeah, exactly, dude. Like,
Sonny, I have a question.
Yeah.
So this template thing is using the map connect, map state to prods and that connect function of the typical Redux stuff under the hood, or it is something different?
So
what's the difference between the typical Redux style and this template?
The way to think of it is rather than, so if you, have you ever done a class-based component versus a functional in React?
Yeah.
So in a class, so for those of you who haven't even, right, in class-based components, you have things like, you have different
Setter and getter.
Yeah, you have like, I mean, not setters and getters, but like you would have like a different way of writing it in a class-based component. Whereas in functional components, you just use hooks, right? You use the use state hook to prepare a piece of state. Now, the reason why this makes it so simple is because it actually sort of eradicates a lot of mistakes. Like if you ever done a class-based component, you'll notice that when you do this dot set state, there's a lot more room for error. Whereas there's bindings, there's this keyword that throws everyone off, right? So
I've never been able to understand it, to be honest.
I don't think any developer truly understands this. But the main point is that like it's just more room for error, right? And now that's why, like, obviously hooks was an advancement in sort of React. So it was something which came out afterwards, and it was something which made something. It made it a lot easier for you to go ahead and code functionally. Now it makes it a lot more easy to write your code in a much more understandable way. For example, the dispatch, right? Like here, for example, let me go ahead and share my screen again. The dispatch over here, you'll notice that like all it does is it just says use dispatch. We don't even need to know what else happens. Like they've made it that simple, right? It's a hook. And sure, you can go ahead and click into it and then use, don't do that because you need to know TypeScript for that. But this is basically like use selector, for example. They've made it to a point where you literally just pass in like your selector. And even today, we actually covered something called selectors, which is something which I didn't actually know about until quite late on in my first job. Thank you so much, Carlos, by the way. Papa React, you're making things so easy to grasp. I need to take a little break. I'm going to go ahead and bring that on screen now. You make things so easy to grasp. I have to take a little break from Conv AI to master this code piece of state stuff in Redux. Thanks. You're welcome, dude. And thank you so much for the donation. That's awesome, man. I'm glad you found some value in that. But yeah, so what I would say is there's a few different concepts here that we need to like sort of bear in mind, right? Like in React, so the golden nuggets of today's session, right? So what I would sort of tell you to focus your time on right now is the following. So I want you guys to go ahead and things to focus on, okay? So some things to focus on. Now, one is HTML, CSS, JS, right? The better you get at any of this stuff, the more it's going to benefit you in the long run, right? It's always going to come back in full circle and help you out in some way, shape, or form. So here, that's going to be something which is always going to benefit you as a developer. Now, two, we have obviously we spoke about React, right? So obviously today's session was entirely in React, so that's going to help push us far, right? Now, this is where we sort of mentioned Redux, and Redux was to solve the problem of managing data within the app. So we went over the sort of data flow inside of an application and how you can use it to make your app more maintainable, to make it more sort of split in a way that makes more sense. So inside of Redux, we had a few things. All I'm going to say here is master the pattern, right? Then the syntax doesn't matter, right? So this is number one, master that pattern that we spoke about today. Because then once you know that pattern, the syntax, regardless of if it changes or like we're now using hooks and before it was class-based stuff, it really doesn't matter after that point. If you know the pattern and you know the sort of fundamental of how Redux works, it really isn't going to matter past that point. So that's going to help you in sort of grasping the concepts of Redux. We also talked about something today called selectors. So selectors are insane. They are something which I wish I used a lot more of early in my career because they do make your code. And even when I do freelance projects, I always use selectors now because they literally, trust me, build your code right, not in a way that just works. Build it right from the get-go, and it will save you so much hassle and pain down the line. And then inside of React as well, 2 fundamentals that I want you guys to master. So 2 fundamentals, this stuff here is, number 1 is state inside of an app, inside of a component. And number 2, damn it. Number 2 is props. That's so disproportionate, but anyway. And number 2 is props, right? Now, props, we didn't cover too much today, but these 2 things inside of React are going to be essential for you to sort of like, to push your React skills further, right? So with this said, and obviously we spoke about things like Flexbox and things like that, which is obviously going to help your design skills sort of go to the next level when it comes to CSS. Sorry for the squiggly line. Yeah. So you can see today, so I want you guys to focus on the fundamentals, things like Flexbox. And if you haven't already played it, go ahead and check out, go ahead and check out Flexbox Froggy. Don't underestimate this game, guys. Like I kid you not, it taught me Flexbox. A game taught me Flexbox. And I went back to that game several times, and I promise you, it really did make me like, the reason why I'm so good at Flexbox now is because of that game. It's just flexboxfroggy.com, I think, or Google it.
Sonny, I have a question regarding Flexbox.
Okay.
There are things and designs that can be done by Flexbox. So usually they say online that it's better to use grid. Is that true?
Yeah, so that you can definitely achieve some powerful designs with Flexbox. You can achieve some really powerful designs with CSS Grid. It really depends on your sort of like your requirement, but don't underestimate Flexbox, because I'm not sure if I'm allowed to do this, but I'll show you guys. But I'll show you a company that I worked at before, right? So it's Mr.
Because they say that Flex is unidirectional and not multi-directional.
Yeah, honestly, dude, don't even worry about the jargon. Like if it can make the thing look a certain way, that's what you need to worry about. Like in this case, so I'll show you an example. So I built this web page this was one of the companies I worked at once. So it's pretty sick, like nice little UI and stuff like that. And then if you go down here, so I built this section here, and I remember we had the exact same discussion that you mentioned now, and they were like, the designer had all these funky designs, right? And they were like, oh no, we can't really have that design because Flexbox isn't going to allow it. And I was like, no, let me see if we can do this, right? So this is all done with Flexbox and breakpoints, right? So what I'm going to show you now is, look when it resizes, right? So everything that you're about to see is done with Flexbox and breakpoints. So look at that, it resizes to that size, and then as it gets smaller, boom, it starts to resize. And look at that, everything you see there. And these are not like, these are individual circles. So as in, you can get really granular with the designs, and like that's a design which if you had sort of originally looked at, you'd be like, okay, there's no way I can build that with Flexbox, right? This was actually built with Flexbox, and it uses a combination of Flexbox. In particular, it uses the order, the special thing called order inside of Flexbox, and it uses some kind of some positioning here as well. But this is kind of an advanced case of using it, but you can see like it's extremely powerful. So never underestimate it, because you can really get some funky designs out of it. And there's also like, at one point I'll show you something called Storybook. Storybook is how I built all of these components literally without even looking at any of the other, the rest of the web page. So you build it in isolation, and it teaches you very good responsive principles and stuff like that. But that's a conversation for another day. But yeah, so just to sort of wrap up again, the fundamentals, we have the Flexbox, we have like Redux, master the pattern. And what I would say is, like I always teach it this way, learn React Context API first, and then move to Redux, because you're going to get that pattern a lot easier. And the implementation of React Context API is kind of simple compared to this. But with the template, yes, this is cool. But like Pedro said, and a few others said, the syntax is kind of confusing. Whereas in the React Context API, it's kind of easier to grasp. So I'd say use that approach first, and then kind of go with this. And then React fundamentals, I want you guys to kind of dial down on the 2 main fundamentals, state and props. These two are going to take you so far, and you need to know these in order to sort of build out the web page. Because remember, it's like building a house. If your house is weak on the fundamentals, like you haven't got a solid ground, the house is eventually going to sink or it's going to break somewhere. And trust me, it will happen at some point. Like you might not see it now, but it will come to a point where you're going to go ahead and be like, oh, the app works, it's fine. But you're going to reach a point where everything starts to like break and it's kind of like holding on by a thread. And that's where you don't want to be, right? So that's going to help you out a lot. So with that said, I'm going to take 2 questions and then we're going to wrap up. So 2 questions and then it's completely wrap up. But has anyone got a final 2 questions? And then we'll go ahead and finish up there.
Sonny, I do have a question.
Go for
Once
it, Gabriel.
you learn context and then you learn Redux, and you're comfortable with both, should we stick with Redux since it allows you to scale once you get past a certain point?
Okay, so it's a very good question. So personally, what I would say is building your skill set on Redux is going to make you, it's going to provide a lot of value in commercial environments, production environments. I still use the React Context API for freelancing jobs. For example, I took on a freelancing job not long ago. I used the React Context API because it was just the easier thing to use, right? It was quicker for me to build. I was able to get the exact sort of functionality that I needed, and I didn't need to overcomplicate the build. So I used React Context API. But like I said, once you get that pattern dialed in, really doesn't matter what syntax, what method you're using. But to be honest, they've made Redux so easy with the new toolkit. I mean, like if I needed to create something a little bit more, you know, like a little bit more sort of intense, I actually probably would use Redux now because before the resistance was higher because the entry was kind of like, you know, it was really long to get everything set up. Now you just run that one command and the entire template's up and running. So before they didn't have that. So I would have always gone with the React Context API. But now I would say in terms of your value as a developer, Redux is going to push you really far away. Yeah. Awesome, dude. That was a good question. Anyone final question, guys?
Hey, Sonny, what are the implementations of Redux are you planning to include in the modules?
So modules right now are yet
like
to...
any heavy Node.js type of interaction.
So right now we're still working out the module sort of syllabus for React because there's quite a lot there's a lot to break down in terms of how we sort of teach it, what's the best way to teach it. And we're using these calls as a good sort of like filter as to understand where the sort of trigger points are or where students find it difficult, where students find resistance. So it would most likely eventually be a case of React basics, teaching you sort of the A to B in terms of React. Then it will sort of teach you the kind of React context API route and then some kind of demo project and then kind of progress into your Redux build and show that kind of project. And then you'll sort of see the progression that I'm talking about. And then eventually like the final project will be some full...
Something like an Amazon clone, full stack with Redux, you know.
Yeah, and honestly, what I would say is don't even wait for the React modules, dude. Like I would say the React challenge has everything. And what I would say is take it upon yourself to go ahead and literally clone the... So if you, and this is a good example exercise for anyone right now, is go ahead, do the template that we did today and then repurpose it for the Amazon clone. If you can get that working, I guarantee you your Redux will be dialed in and you would have different slices for different pieces of states. That is an awesome exercise for anyone who wants to really push their knowledge right now. And sort of like, because that's going to really excel you in terms of, because it's going to be something which is going to really push you in terms of understanding and where things, you know, like it's going to really push you in that level. And it's going to be a very, very good exercise for you to do.
Today's lessons were about Redux, not the context API, React context API. Right?
Yeah, today was about Redux today. Yeah.
So the main difference, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, so you can.
So the main difference you would say between context API and Redux is that the Redux allow you to create multiple slices, but context API doesn't.
No, so you can.
Is that the right understanding then?
You can do it with React Context API, but React Context API wasn't built for this. Like it wasn't really built to be used in that way. I've modified it in a way to make it do the exact same job in a very easy snippet of code.
So when you say modified, is it more not manageable type of code that you create?
Yeah, I would say so. Redux is built to scale. It's built to, you can definitely do it with React Context API. Redux has a lot. And remember, what we spoke about today was a direct comparison of what React Context API offers against Redux. Redux offers a ton more in terms of middleware, in terms of extra things that you can plug into Redux. Just like you can plug things into React, Redux itself has a bunch of it's so well built out in terms of community. You have
just plug and play basically.
Yeah, you have Redux Thunk, you have Redux Offline, which handles offline data persistence. All that sort of stuff is now sort of supported, and they have immense documentation around it, and it's a really well supported library module, whatever the hell we want to call it. Yeah.
Most fund companies will ask for Redux if they are listing it on their, it's Redux that they list. I'm not seeing context API.
Yeah, it would be Redux that they would list, exactly. So my approach is learn the React Context API to understand the pattern, and then transition across to Redux, and you'll find the transition easy. Otherwise, if you jump straight to Redux, it's like trying to, you can't even walk yet, and you're trying to sprint. You see, it's gonna be a very big jump. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's gonna be something which is gonna be a lot more resistant. You're gonna face a lot more resistance and difficulty in understanding, as opposed to, and this is, take it from someone who went the hard route in the beginning, and this would ease your transition by doing the React Context API, then progressing to the Redux.
Cool.
Dope.
Yeah, hey Sonny.
When does the recording become available?
So remember, it'll be straight on YouTube right now, and what we're doing is we're dialing in the process to get it up on PWJ as quick as possible as well. We're trying to work on that in terms of we're working with the customer support team to make that really quick and easy. There's been a bunch of headache with this, even with the waiting room stuff from updates. So we're just trying to fix a lot of technical stuff while carrying on the content. The YouTube link, if you type in Clever Programmer, I'll go ahead and drop it in the Zoom chat right now. But yeah, so remember, these chats you can pretty much just go ahead and watch on YouTube. But yeah, that will.
So Sonny, this will be the norm going forward. All the calls will be on simultaneously streamed on YouTube and then. So it's the reason I'm saying is, if it's on YouTube, there's less of a headache because people keep asking for this, and if you're already pushing it to YouTube, then no worries, right?
Yeah. So there's two reasons.
Right away.
One is it's going to help a lot more people too. And if anyone who's got the questions, as opposed to but then you get the coaching calls on YouTube, it's not the same. Trust me, it's not the same. To be inside the call and to ask questions and to be inside the community and things like that, you have a lot of value here. You also have direct access to each other. You have direct access to a lot more. Also, it's something we're trialing. We're testing it out for now. It doesn't. Okay. We're not saying yes, we're going to be putting every coaching call in the future on YouTube, but remember, on YouTube, there's only limited calls. On PWJ, you have all the previous calls as well that you can go back on and check out as well. So yeah. And also, everyone on YouTube, go ahead and smash the thumbs up button if you enjoyed that. Yeah.
If you have room for one more question.
Let's do it. One more question and we're done.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So you were saying in Redux, it's like a layer of onion, right?
Yep.
And for each context, we are having various slices.
Yeah.
Right. So now in this case, we're having the counter, but we might have multiple variables also in one particular slice, right?
Yep.
So do I do it in the initial state? I create an object inside it, or should I? How do I encounter? If I'm facing such a case scenario, how do I encounter that?
So you do it like this. You pretty much just have initial state, the name, age. You'll have things like the name, age. Let's just say height. 6 foot. You'll have the. I'm not 20, by the way. Yeah, 26. There we go. And then you can have I don't know, city, London, or something like this. Okay. And then basically what you could do is, if I show you inside the app quickly. Now, if we go to the state, you see inside the user, we have the variables.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Sonny, in that right there where you, the initial state, that could be a database call where you're getting all that information on load, and instead of hard coding it here.
No, so you want to set the initial state always here, And then inside of your app, you would have a use effect, which would make a call upon loading.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. So you want to do that. And then you kind of like, it really depends, right? So you can, sometimes you have middlewares as well, which handle this. This kind of comes down to architecture, which kind of gets a little bit more complicated, but try and keep it simple for now. But to solve the problem at this point, use a use effect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Perfect. Okay. With that said, guys,
Sonny.
What's up?
Yeah, Sonny, I'm just asking about these hooks,
Yep.
like use effect. Are you gonna plan on this, that you will gonna teach the hooks like on a separate call?
Yeah. So in fact, what I would recommend you really heavily do, and this will provide you with a huge amount of value, is for hooks and things like that, go ahead and check out previous coaching calls, and also go ahead and check out the clones on the clones, guys. The clones are so valuable. Like I'm not joking. Those clones will teach you everything. They will teach you, because it's one thing to teach you it, right? But if you see it being used in all sorts of scenarios, it just shows you, okay, I can use it like this, I can use it like this, I can use it like this. This is how I write it, and then you get pattern recognition, which means that even if you don't recognize the syntax, you know that, okay, he's using a use state hook, he's using a use effect hook. That's what that does. That's what this does. So the clones, there's like 25 clones up on YouTube right now. I'd recommend checking all of them in your own time. And also I would recommend also checking the previous coaching calls, because there are some coaching calls that I actually went through hooks, just purely hooks. But for sure, like there will be definitely like top up taster sessions of hooks and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, because I recommend that especially for the when we move from the class-based component to the functional components.
Yeah.
So what exactly on which syntax is representing, like a use effect? Use effect do a multiple job.
Yeah.
Like component did mount, component will unmount.
Exactly.
Like that.
Yeah.
So these kind of concepts we want to understand, because this is the main, like, subscribing. When we should subscribe, when we should unsubscribe, these actions like that.
Yeah, this is all going to be part of React Basics, which is the module that we're going to be dropping soon in PWJ. So I'm working on that now, but at the same time, I'm shooting the videos on Thursday, Friday for Discord, iMessage. So there's quite a lot of like content, as well as a gazillion tech issues behind the scenes. So really trying to like pump out the content for you guys, so to get you guys as much value as possible. But 100%, I agree with you. And also, just to answer your question, all of those lifecycle hooks that you mentioned, component did mount, component will mount, component should update, and all those things, every single one gets replaced with use effect, which is nice. Yeah. So every single one gets replaced with use effect.
But how many times we use it? We have to understand that, because the use case, like if you will teach us the use case for one example.
So the use case,
that will be like,
the use case, that's what I'm saying. So the use case is going to be the best way of demonstrating that, is because even if I was to explain it in a call, the best thing for you to do is go through those clones, honestly, because you'll see so many use effect use cases in those clones that I demonstrate on different builds, different clones, different scenarios, and we use tons of different use effects throughout that. So I would definitely go ahead and check that out. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. With that said, guys, I'm gonna call it on questions there. I hope you guys enjoyed that call.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome, bro.
Nice.
That was dope, man.
Amazing.
I love that, guys. And also,
Papa React always drives value, man.
Thank you, dude.
I want more from you, Sonny. I want more calls from you.
Thank you so much, guys. So pretty much, and thank you also for accommodating today, because it was a change of plan, but you guys are awesome. You guys stuck around and sort of stuck to the end. So really appreciate and love all of you guys. And like I said, go ahead and go through this entire build in your own time. And if you can, and you want to challenge, literally try and do a Redux conversion of the Amazon clone. That'll be an awesome challenge for you guys. But with that said, everyone on YouTube as well, if you enjoyed that, smash the thumbs up button, because it'll just help the video go out to more people, and it'll help. We're almost at 800K subscribers, which is insane. Literally, we're like a few away from it. So thank you so much, guys. And yeah, I know, right? Thank you so much, guys. And I will see you in the next coaching call.
See you.
Yeah?
See you.
Actually, no, I'll see you this week on Thursday and Friday. Yeah. See you guys on YouTube.
Bye.
Peace, guys. Peace.
Bye bye everyone.
Bye, everyone.
And for everyone on YouTube, if you guys enjoyed that, stick around. Make sure you subscribe. We're almost at 800K. So if you want to be a part of that, literally just hit the subscribe button. Make sure you subscribe to the notifications. And also, guys, smash the thumbs up button so that the video goes out to as many people as it possibly can. Really appreciate and love all of you guys. And I will see you next time. Signing out. Peace.